Hello, everyone. Welcome to another long-haul flight of chat that we call the Lithorati Guns N' Roses Not in This Lifetime Lithograph Review. My name is Rich, and alongside me, as usual, is Tim. This episode, we find ourselves covering the second half of what a lot of us like to refer to as the golden age of Guns N' Roses lithographs, namely the Europe 2017 leg of the Not in This Lifetime tour. The first half of this golden age being, the legs just preceding this one, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, and Asia, which actually all kind of ran one after another in quick succession. I, for one, certainly remember the time being quite a blur. It felt like they were in Japan, then a week later, they were in New Zealand, and the following week they were in Australia, then Singapore, then Bangkok, then Dubai. They really clocked up the frequent flyer miles for a few weeks there. There was a fairly extensive break after that, almost 3 months, if I recall correctly. A well-earned break, I might add, before embarking on their Europe 2017 leg. And it must have done wonders because they really knocked it out of the park with the shows, and the lithograph design certainly followed suit. In terms of quality, volume, and as a collective leg, one could argue, actually, that it doesn't get any better than Europe 2017. So I'm sure Tim would agree that we've kind of been looking forward to doing this episode for a while. Wouldn't you say, Tim?
Absolutely. And you're right. It was nice when there was a break before this European leg, because for a while there it was it took because you have your regular life, going to work and everything else, right? Your family, your friends, and everything else, and then trying to keep up with all this when it's like night after night and everything. It was tough. So it was nice for a little bit of a break before Europe started. But yeah, definitely, of course, the golden age of lithographs for sure. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely. Look, as always, we have a guest this episode who was fortunate enough to have gone to one of those shows. And in fact, I believe it was the biggest show of the entire tour, with more than 70,000 people in attendance. We'll tune in a little bit later to listen to his story and get him to give us a glimpse into what his concert experience and perhaps also what his merch experience was like. I usually start the episodes with a guest interview, but I thought I'd mix it up a little this time around. I thought we might cover some talking points first, then move on to the reviews and the interview. It's been a few months since the previous episode, and there's a couple of arguably controversial things that have happened in the lithograph world, I suppose, the Guns N' Roses lithograph world, that I thought might make for a good discussion with which to open the show. So let's deal with the elephant in the room to begin with, and the elephant in the room is, of course, Kobe. Most of us, I think, are familiar with Kobe, the type of people that keep tuning in for our long, drawn-out podcasts are usually already very familiar with which designs are hard to find and expensive to buy. But for the uninitiated, the lithograph for the Kobe concert is considered to be arguably the holy grail of Guns N' Roses lithographs. It's not necessarily the rarest, it's not the scarcest, and you're not going to get everyone to agree that it's their favorite, but it's rated so highly in all of those categories that since pretty much the day it came out, it's been considered the most valuable lithograph from the entire leg. It was limited to only 150 copies, so definitely one of the rarest. And with all of the difficulties involved with actually getting your hands on one, even on the day of the concert, the snow, the wind, the VIP line, getting early access to merchandise, the Japanese, inherently being rabid collectors of any limited edition item, and it being an international concert, it all adds up to it being one of the scarcest. And even if it's not, everybody's favorite, it almost always shows up in everyone's top 5 or top 10 favorite designs. So with all of that said, it very, very rarely shows up for sale, and yet that's exactly what happened. Back in September, a Kobe showed up on eBay for the first time in maybe a couple of years, I think. And not only did it sell for a record amount, as far as we can tell anyway, but it sold for substantially more than most expected. Now, I know, Tim, you and I were probably fairly clued in to its value. I mean, we knew it would go for thousands, but did you imagine $9,000? You know, like what's your take on the whole situation?
Well, yeah, like the thing is, I think there's something with, for some reason, stuff from Japan, like any of the Japan tours that they have done, or Japan dates, I should say, because sometimes it's just one date, it's not really a tour necessarily, but for some reason it brings a higher price, and I don't know what it is about Japan or Japanese stuff, and who knows why. It could have been just two people duking it out. I mean, like, you can't really see like who the bidders are anymore on eBay and stuff, but or it could have been, you never know, maybe it's someone. I mean, think about this. Imagine, like, you have all the lithographs so far except for one, and let's pretend it's not even like one of the most desirable ones. Let's say it's like that Lincoln, Nebraska one or something, right? Okay. And even though normally that lithograph might only fetch like $100 or whatever, but maybe you're willing to pay like $700 for it because they're going to complete your collection. You see what I'm saying? Right. And so it could have been that thing going on. Like, this person didn't really want to wait another 3 years until another one popped up on eBay. So maybe they just wanted to pay a bunch of money and close that right off the bat. Now, that being said, it's still a lot of money to do that with. And hey, man, everyone has that thing they spend money on, right? Some people it's sunglasses, some people it's cars. And I don't mean like a regular car, but I mean like, a car in addition to your normal car, like that. Everyone has their thing that they spend money on. People don't realize it, but everyone has that. And so that's what happened here. Now, what people need to understand, though, about the thing about eBay or any auction, really, I mean, especially for something that doesn't ever come up like this, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you ever sell yours, that you're going to get $9,000 some odd dollars for it either, right? Because that person that spent that money on it, they're out of the game now, right? Because they have it. And so now, okay, how much would that next person in line have spent, right? And so it's hard. I hope people don't get too excited for people who already have one of these, thinking, oh shit, now mine's worth like $9,000 too. Maybe. Right. I mean, it depends on condition and all that kind of stuff. Also, the guy, I think, whoever sold this, I say guy, could have been a woman. The person that listed this, in my opinion, was smart to put it on eBay. Yeah, eBay, that's true. You're going to have the eBay fees and everything else, but you're going to reach a very wide audience with eBay. That's the advantage of it. I was fortunate to get, like, mine. Not only did I get it closer to when the concert actually happened, but I also got it on a kind of not a very well-known site. And so, but if I had gotten mine on eBay, I'm sure I would have paid a lot more than I paid at the time. So, to me, I say, hey, man, good for the seller, good for the... And I know I might sound like a hypocrite because sometimes I post things on the Guns N' Roses Collectors Facebook page, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this sold for this much, right? But that's usually things that are very common, not something like this, right? So, I say, yeah, good for the seller, good for the buyer. And for those people who think it's ridiculous or whatever, that's your opinion, and you're entitled to it, but doesn't change what happened, I don't know what to say, really.
I had known of several Kobes that had traded hands via private transactions over the years, but they were all, quite a while ago. It was certainly nothing particularly recent. I'm thinking maybe back in either late 2017 or maybe 2018. I knew they had been selling, at least a couple of them had sold in the vicinity of about $5,000. So I was, when I saw it listed, I was very comfortable with it going for at least $5,000. I thought that it would go for at least $5,000. Oh wow! I thought with the public nature of an eBay listing, how long it had been since one had been put up for sale publicly, that $6,000 would not be unrealistic. But with it selling for the price that it did, I learned a few things. I think it highlighted a few things for me personally. First and foremost, I think it highlighted that, the market for Guns N' Roses lithos, even with it being, the best part of a year since the end of the Not in This Lifetime tour, it still, the market for Guns N' Roses lithos, I think, is still very much alive, and especially so for the really collectible designs. I think perhaps the so-called average designs, they're very, very slowly sort of going up in price, generally speaking, with a lot of them finding, permanent homes, or what I like to use the phrase forever homes. Either they're in people's collections or on their walls. The number of lithos left to potentially buy, as a buyer, the number of lithos people are willing to let go of slowly gets smaller and smaller. And I think this rings true even more for the really popular lithos. And in turn, I think the more expensive a collectible becomes, and not just lithographs, but just really collectible stuff, the more expensive a collectible becomes, the harder and more unlikely it becomes that that someone is going to buy it purely as an investment. For example, if something was worth $1,000 and it's for sale on eBay or somewhere for $500, someone who might not need or want one might end up buying it purely speculatively, with the idea of flipping it for a profit. But if that $1,000 item, is selling for $1,000, with little to no margin to make a profit, you're going to only be competing with people who want it to give it a forever home, and I think that's what that's the sort of situation where people are more likely to throw value aside, and instead they will pay what it takes to finally have one in their collection. The second thing it made me aware of was that, everyone, including myself, kind of lives in a bit of a bubble. We're all working on our own information and experiences when it comes to litho rarity and price and all that. And that can obviously skew our perspective. I live and breathe these lithos, but and to use a phrase I probably overuse, I generally like to think that I have my finger on the pulse of the GNR litho market, at least more so than most people.
I would think so.
Generally speaking, I like to think that I could probably ballpark the rarity or the value of a particular design if someone asks me. So that sometimes leads me to people, sometimes it leads to people being surprised when I tell them that a particular litho is worth significantly more or less than what they have in mind. But I think this Kobe selling on eBay opened my eyes to my own biases, I live in a world where I've seen every single litho from the tour in the flesh, and I don't think that there's too many people that can say that. And I've probably handled more lithos than anybody outside of the merch stands at the concerts. I think with the amount of lithos that I've had to trade to be able to complete my collection, I think occasionally I lull myself into the idea that some of these lithographs are more abundant out in the wild than they really are. For example, and this, just to give you an idea of what I'm yapping on about, right now, if I absolutely positively needed a Kobe, if I absolutely positively needed to buy a Cincinnati or a London litho to complete my collection, I know at least one friend, if not more, who has one. And I suppose for the right price, it might be expensive, but I could probably buy it off of them. I could somehow convince them to let go of it and make it part of my collection if I absolutely had to. If I accidentally tore one of my lithos in half and I needed to get another one, I'd like to think that I've got enough connections and I know enough people that I could make that happen. I could replace it. But for many other people, if not most other people, that's not an option they have. There are clearly people out there who have probably been waiting months and months and months for the opportunity to buy a rare litho like Kobe. And their only potential avenue of opportunity is eBay. They might not have, the contacts out there. They might not know a friend who can help them out. They might simply not know a friend of a friend, And I think for a surprising amount of people, a Kobe or some other design might actually be even rarer to see than it might be for us. And I think that contributes to the occasional lithograph selling for more than we expect. Remember, it was only a few months before Kobe sold that a San Francisco litho sold for hundreds of dollars more than most of us were expecting. So yeah, I think there's something to be said for not underestimating how difficult it is for non-fanatics to get their hands on collectibles. And additionally, even though we have no clue who bought it, at least I don't, someone did bring up the potential idea that the buyer was, either someone from Japan or some other foreign country, and that's something else to consider. The seller was based in Japan, and I think it would be very presumptuous to assume, that the buyer is American. eBay is a worldwide site, and we know Guns N' Roses has a huge European fan base, a huge South American fan base, a huge Japan fan base. JNR fans are now, slightly older, a slightly richer demographic. I know I usually imagine the average litho collector, Guns N' Roses litho collector, to be an English speaker, but there's no reason to think that the buyer is a native English speaker living in an English-speaking country. There's a whole world of non-English, native English-speaking fans out there, and they're collectors too. We've got to open our imagination to the idea that, the potential market for these lithos may be significantly larger than we give it credit for.
A few more things I want to say about it. First of all, by the way, if you're someone who ever sells a lithograph for this much money, make sure you pack it extremely well when you mail that, because you don't really want to have to get into the whole partial refund thing too, or even having the person send it back to you, because that could damage it even more.
Full insurance.
Just make sure you get it right.
Full
and if you
insurance.
Don't know, right, exactly, full insured. And if you don't know how to mail it, just ask people, and we can tell you. But you want to get it right. The other thing, this is a great example, by the way, and what we talk about next is going to be another good example of this. Look. When I say I hate when people ask me how much something is worth, understand that I'm not hating the person asking that question. I'm hating the question, and the reason why I hate it is because I've asked myself the same question, and it's a hard thing because it's true that, and I know people always give this answer. It's as much as the person wants to pay for it, and people don't like that answer. But this is a great example where that's very true, because as you just mentioned, I think at least 95% of us would say that you're the expert on GNR lithographs, and you said right there that you think it was worth $5,000, and here it sells for almost twice that. So here's a good example of, okay, let's say one was available to you all of a sudden, Ricky, and you're like, okay, I need one for some reason, but I'm only going to spend $5,000 for it, and this person, whoever this was, spent $10,000 for it. All right, so to you it's worth $5,000, to this person it's worth $10,000, right? And this is why, you'll see a lot of times too when people try to sell anything, not just lithographs. Doesn't matter if it's a house, a car, whatever it is. Oh, I think it's worth $10 million, or that's great. You can think it's worth whatever you want, but the question is, not only is there other people who think it's worth that, because there could be a ton of people out there who think this lithograph is worth $1 million. Let's say, great. But how many of those people can afford to spend that $1 million, right? So you're right. The market for some things is very small. And I think this person who sold this, they just got it at the right time. The circumstances just all worked out for the seller, I think. And that's great, obviously. And I think just people need to keep that in mind. And when we talk about next, is going to be a good example of the flip side of this, right?
I think you hit on a really interesting point there, because people ask me sometimes how much a particular lithograph is worth, and setting aside already the word games that you can play with worth and value. How much, what's the value of something? How much is something worth? Even in English, that's, you're starting to deal with very vague definitions of these terms. But you mentioned that, regardless of what everyone agrees a particular object is worth or what its value is, if there's nobody around who can afford to pay that amount, it's just a hypothetical number. And, it works the other way around as well. The example that I like to give is when it comes to, say, a collectible vintage car. If you know that there's let's say there's a Ferrari that's worth $10 million, and your next door neighbor is in dire straits and he desperately needs $1 million. He's got one of these $10 million cars and he's willing to sell it to you for $1 million. Every single person in the world will agree that that's a bargain, that you could instantly, you could buy that for $1 million and flip it even for $2 million within 24 hours. But just because it's a bargain doesn't necessarily mean that anybody has $1 million to blow on a vintage car.
Right.
And, in this situation with the Kobe, what was fortunate enough, I suppose, for the seller is that there was at least, the way that eBay auctions work, there was at least two people that were willing to pay roughly $9,000 for it at the same time. If there was only one person willing to spend $9,000 or $10,000 on it, and the next person in line was only willing to pay $3,000 for it, then it would have sold for $3,100 or $3,001 or whatever. So it's this delicate combination of how much people value the product and how much they have to spend on that product at that particular time.
Absolutely, and that's another reason why I don't want to give an answer when people ask me that, is because imagine someone asked me about the Kobe lithograph, and I told them, how I said earlier, I was thinking $3,000 to $4,000, right? And imagine I said that they list it for $3,500. Let's say someone buys it. Okay, great, they got it. All right, fair enough. And then that person who buys it then lists it. Once they get it, they list it on eBay, and they end up getting $9,000 or whatever this sold for, right? I would feel really bad that I told that person $3,500, right? And on the flip side of that, let's say I told the person, I think it's worth $15,000, and then they have it listed for $15,000 for going on 2 years on eBay, and it's not selling it, and they're getting pissed off. Hey, you told me it was worth this much. That's why I try not to get into that. It's I think if you're someone, I think there's two types of people in the world. There's a type of people that they know, I have this item, here's how much, I don't care how much it's worth in the world, here's how much I want to sell it for, and they do that. And we're going to talk about that in a moment with that other person in a minute, right? But then there's other people who are wondering, well, I don't want to lose out on money that it could be worth. I want to get the most I can. And to that I say, fair enough, that's totally understandable. Listed auction style. Go ahead, no one's stopping you. And the great thing now about auctions on most auction sites is that you can put a reserve. So I want to sell for at least this much, fine, but I also want to get more if I can. Fair enough, right? And I think for everyday people like us, I think eBay is the best place to do that. Yeah, there are higher auction sites like Sotheby's and Christie's, and I don't think they'll ever have GNR stuff on it. But then you have Julian's.
Don't hold your breath.
Well, right. One day they might. I mean, if one of those guys dies and they start listing their stuff off, it might be on a site like that, right? Right. But for right now, I think you have Julian's and Gotta Have Rock and Roll and some of these other places. But the problem with those, you're going to pay more money in fees. I think eBay is probably your best bet at this point, and that's what I recommend people to do. Let the market sort it out, man. Right?
I personally don't mind answering questions when it comes to value, only because I'm very selective with the words that I use, and I usually provide my opinion alongside what I know personally these lithographs have sold for in the past. So, although I might provide a speculative value for a particular lithograph, usually what I'll say is, well, I think that this thing is worth maybe $500. The last one that I know of that sold for $400 6 months ago or 12 months ago or whatever. And so that's why, I thought that the Kobe lithograph might sell for $5,000 to $6,000 because I was basing that on two things mainly. One was I know how much they had previously exchanged hands for, and I knew at least those transactions had happened a certain amount of time ago. Like I knew how long ago how many months it had been since those transactions had taken place. So I based my estimate on those pieces of information, but I was very, very quick to add that, this is only my opinion, and, prices fluctuate constantly. And this is proof enough. I think that, you can have all the information in the world until that final, hammer goes down. You don't know what the price is going to be.
Yep. Absolutely, man.
But on the flip side, like we're talking that Kobe auction was exactly that. It was an auction. However, on the flip side of eBay, you've got buy it now sales. Essentially, it's not really an auction. It's just putting something up for a set price, and people click on buy it now if they're willing to pay that price. And so, we come to the second thing that happened since our previous episode, what everyone seems to have come to refer to as the litho dump. Some eBay seller out of nowhere dumped dozens of lithos on eBay over the course of a few days for very suspiciously low prices. Many of them were, extremely rare and valuable. I think many people, including myself, were skeptical. I mean, after all, we all know that if it's too good to be true, it usually is. And here's someone who doesn't seem to be a regular litho seller on eBay. I think that there's a handful of sellers on eBay that we're familiar with their username, and when a lithograph shows up from them, you can be fairly confident that they are genuine. But this seller was not only not a regular litho seller. I'm not sure if I'd ever seen his username before at all. He had quite a low feedback rating. It was 100%, but it was low. He clearly hadn't sold too many things on eBay. And all of a sudden, he's dumping all of these very rare lithos for very low buy it now prices. He wasn't putting them up as an auction with a low starting price. These were buy it now sales. And, to me, that very easy to chalk something like that up as something very, very sketchy. And, I feel like maybe 9 times out of 10, it would be sketchy. But apparently this time around, this one time apparently was legit. And some people got themselves some real bargains. All that said, I still think it's a good idea to approach any potential purchase with a healthy dose of skepticism. I think this seller was maybe one of those very rare situations where people lucked out and got themselves a really, really, really good deal on some of those lithographs. But there are, sadly, there are still some really trashy dirtbag sellers on eBay selling so-called, reprints and that sort of stuff. eBay really doesn't seem to give a shit about policing that sort of stuff. So the only thing one can do is be careful. Yeah, I don't know. What did you think when it all went down, when you saw these things going for such cheap prices?
Well, I mean, right. As someone who's been in the game a long time, not just the collecting world, but the lithograph world, like you, of course, yeah, I was like, right off the bat, I was like, oh, no way, these can't possibly be legit. And not all of them. I mean, there were some that were like fairly common ones, and I was like, okay, maybe you could sell it for that. But other ones, I was like, these are pretty rare. Why is he selling it for only this much money? Or I say he again, could have been a she. I don't know. Yeah, so of course I was skeptical, and I'm really aggravated that I was skeptical because he actually had one that I need that ended up, I think he sold it off of eBay, but he sold it for the same price of eBay. And so, yeah, that's too bad I could have gotten that one. But, this is a good example where, not everyone in the world is looking for thousands of dollars for each lithograph that they're trying to sell, right? And
Very
that's
true.
fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. And all right. And I mean, maybe, especially what people need to understand about that Kobe lithograph that sold, that was an auction style one. And I think it was probably like at least 7, maybe even a 10-day auction. So, it's going to take a while to sell. Now, if you're someone that needs money really quickly, then maybe this is the other way to go for you, right? And I think in this case, this person said it was something like that. But for everyone else, I know a lot of people who were like pissed off about this, and I get it. I can understand. It depends on why they're pissed off. Like, for example, there's a lot of auctions that I miss out on, right? Because either I didn't pay attention to eBay or because I forgot to bid, right? I get pissed off, but I get pissed off at myself for being lazy and not checking eBay or forgetting to bid. I'm not pissed off at the seller. I'm not pissed off at the person who got the deal. Like, I don't really understand that. Like, everyone's going to get good deals in their life. So, man, so this was their turn for these people here, right?
Agreed. I think that there's plenty of lithographs where I know I got a bargain, that I know that there were some purchases on eBay that have ended up being, at the time I thought, okay, this is a fair amount. And then as the months roll on, as we start to, develop the ability to look at these things in hindsight, we get to realize how much of a bargain we got, and then there's other times also where I've traded for lithographs. I've made agreements with people months or weeks before a concert, and if a friend is going to go to a concert that I'm not going to, without knowing what the design is going to look like, I make a deal. Hey, look, I'll trade you, get me one from that show, and I'll trade it for the concert that I'm going to. And there have been a couple of times where I've lucked out, and the lithograph that I trade for ends up being certainly better looking or more valuable than the one that I'm letting go of.
Right.
Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And I think that I can totally understand being upset that you missed out on a bargain. And some of those lithographs in that litho dump were definitely bargains. I'm a little bit jealous of some of the great prices that some people got, but if you're going to dwell on it, you're probably just going to give yourself an ulcer.
Absolutely. That's all that's going to happen, because I've been through this many times in my life with other things on eBay. And I've gotten sick over some things, And by the way, it might not also just be an instance of like, oh, well, this person needs money real quick, so they're going to sell these things cheaply. Maybe in this person's opinion, that's how much they think each of these lithographs is worth. That's what we're talking about just with this last one, right? Some people think they're worth hundreds or thousands. Some people think they're only worth, 100 or whatever. And that's fine. That's their business, right?
I collect other things other than lithographs. And sometimes there's just people who have got some of these collectible items or rare items, and, they're just not interested in making a significant profit off of it. They're just happy to put it in the hands of someone who's going to appreciate the object. Sometimes they're just happy to cover their own costs and to cover shipping and maybe make a couple bucks on top of that. Some people don't nickel and dime the whole thing to death and take the enjoyment out of it, which is good for people that want to find a bargain. But like I said, if you dwell too much on getting a bargain and absolutely positively with every single deal that you make, getting absolutely the best possible price and making sure that you get a better deal than the next person, you're just going to stress yourself out. There's always going to be someone who pays more than you. There's always going to be someone who pays less than you. If you imagine the thousands of lithographs out there, there's only one person who got the number one best bargain deal in the world. Everyone else got screwed in comparison to that guy. So there's only one guy in the world that got the best deal. And if you're going to, you've got to accept that you're going to almost certainly be one of the other people. I remember, I think, when you're in college, you come up with some really stupid topics of conversation. And I remember coming up with the topic with some friends of who has the best job or who has the worst job in the world. And if you're going to make a list, guaranteed there's going to be that one person who's got the worst job in the world, and absolutely everyone else, all the other 8 billion people in the world, have got better jobs than him. But that's only one person, and the flip side, there's going to be that one person that if you could make a list, there's going to be one person that's got the best job in the world, and everybody else has got a worse job. And if you try to dwell on the fact that some lucky person's got a better job than you're going to cause yourself more harm than good. And I think to a lesser extent, this is this similar sort of situation when it comes to bargain hunting with not just lithographs but collectibles in general. That if you are only focusing on getting the best deal possible and not focusing on getting your hands on something cool that you're going to enjoy owning, then I think you're probably missing the point.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, I remember one time a friend of mine wanted me to come with him when he went to a car dealer to buy a car, right? And he was getting a car. Granted, this was his main car to use as his regular car, right? It's not like he had, other cars to drive. But the car he was getting was like a sports car, right? It was a Dodge Challenger. And, and for some reason at the dealership, he's like looking at me. He's like, what do you think, And all I said to him was like, well, there's only 2 questions you got to ask yourself. Like, one, can you afford it or not? Then even if you can, all right, is it going to make you happy? And if the answer is yes, then do it, right?
Right.
And I think that's what it comes down to, any collectible. So if you want to pay $10,000 for one, like that person with the Kobe one, awesome, go ahead, And if you're happy, if you're selling them, and if you're happy selling it for, whatever these went for, $75, $100, then that's great. Whatever makes you happy in life, man. And the only thing that probably sucked for this seller is, I'm guessing they probably had to answer like hundreds of messages. I'm sure, right? Not had to answer. I guess you could ignore them, but I'm sure they got like hundreds of messages, and
right.
And I know I sent at least 1 or 2. But yeah, I mean, hey, good for them, and good for whoever bought them. I'm happy for. Of course, I'm jealous, but I'm happy for you, And that's the other thing. Like, it's one thing if you want to be a little bit aggravated at the seller. Maybe I could sort of understand that, but at the buyer, I really don't get. Like, what if that was you? You would, you wouldn't want people cursing your name. I mean, Anyway, I don't know.
I think also there were some people that were upset that the seller apparently sold some lithographs off of eBay.
Yeah, they did.
And also there were some people upset that some potential buyers were messaging the seller, telling them, hey, you're screwing yourself out of hundreds of dollars. This thing's worth a hell of a lot more than you sold it for. You should relist or whatever. And okay, I understand that some of those actions are, they can be douchebag moves. However, I think also for any of those things to happen, like if a potential buyer convinces a seller to relist an item because they didn't realize how much a particular item was worth and they wanted to relist it to get more. You got to realize that, okay, yeah, it can be a douchebag move on behalf of the potential buyer, but it takes 2 to tango. The seller has to be convinced to go ahead with that douchebag tactic, that clearly this particular seller didn't. I don't think there was any lithograph that he sold that, I don't think he canceled any auction and relisted it to make any more profit. So he didn't go ahead with that. But, if I'm sure that happens, I'm certain that it happens on eBay, that there's people that get tweaked onto the idea. They realize that they've accidentally sold something for significantly less than it's worth, and they've just ended up canceling the first auction and relisting it and getting more money. But that's the decision of the seller, right? That it takes both the douchebag move from the potential buyer and the douchebag move from the seller for that sort of thing to eventuate. So you can't just blame the people that are sending the messages to the seller, you've got to put a little bit of blame, a little bit of responsibility on the behalf of the seller as well.
Well, I completely agree, right? It definitely is a two-way street. Although I will say this, some of the things on eBay are kind of, sorry to curse, but fucked up. Like, I've had things where the auction or the listing has ended, and I don't mean ended like because it ended. I mean like I ended it because I bid on it or because I pressed the buy it now button, right? And then the seller still refused to send it and listed at a higher price because they realized it was worth more. Yeah. And to me, that's a whole different ballgame, you know?
Right.
But you're right, though. This guy didn't do that, or this person, I should say, didn't do that in all fairness to them, which speaks to their integrity. And by the way, for the people who are frustrated, like you can send them emails or messages saying that it's worth more, and that's fine. Maybe they are, but if that person is fine not selling them for more, that's their prerogative too, and you just got to accept that. And you know, there's nothing to do about it. Like, you know, sometimes something is sold and you missed out on it and it sucks, but you just got to move the fuck on.
It's not just eBay, right? Like, everyone's been to a yard sale or a flea market where you know, you offer someone $10 for an item and, you know, the guy says, yeah, sure. And then the asshole right next to you offers 20.
Yep.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And like you've got this verbal agreement, so to speak, with the seller. But like, if the seller decides to tell you, no, your $10 isn't good enough, I'm going to sell it to the guy next to you that just offered me $20. You know, there's nothing you could do about that. It's a douchebag thing to do, but like, what can you do? It happens. So, you know, I feel like this is probably a bit of a extension of that, you know, a digital extension of that sort of action.
I think, right. I think the best thing you can do, and this could be said for just in life in general, I think, is try to put, you know, spend a few moments of your life to put and use your head and think and put yourself in the mind of the, you know, of being in the other person's shoes, right? You know what I mean? And what you would do in their situation. And yeah. You know.
And it's interesting. Look, I will be the first to admit, if I sold something on eBay for, you know, $100 or $1,000, and then I found out that it was worth $10,000 or $100,000, look, I'm not going to be ashamed to admit that I'd probably cancel the auction and list it again. You know, it all depends on perspective. For some people, you know, getting an extra $100 for an item is worth the scumbag feeling of doing something like that. Other people, they're probably not gonna do it, even if it means making another $10,000. It will vary from person to person. But anyone out there who's going to raise their hand and say they would absolutely never do that thing, I'm probably not going to believe you. I think everyone's got their price. Everyone's price might be different, but everyone's got their price. There's gonna be a number out there where if you stand to profit X amount of dollars more, or there's something else in it for you to do it, you know, everyone's probably going to do it for the right deal.
I think so too. And, you know, look, man, you know, morals and ethics are what they are and everything, right? You know, but something to keep in mind, especially with this topic that we're all talking about here, is that these are what I would, you know, put under the category of luxury goods, luxury items, right? It's not like, you know, the world's ending and I'm trying to sell someone a case of water for $5,000, right? You know what I mean? So, you know, these are luxury items. So in the end, does it really matter? You know, I think we all have other things that are more important in our lives and everything. And you know, to those people that, oh man, I was really looking for that particular lithograph. Because sometimes it's not even about the fact that, you know, this person sold it for only $100 and you didn't get it, but it's also the fact that, oh, it never comes up for sale. And that was the one I could have gotten. To those people, I say, there's things that I've been after that I recently got for 3 decades. You know, so be patient, man. Be patient, you know, right?
Some people can't be that patient, though.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, I guess, you know.
But, man, if I had to wait 30 years, you know, for something, I'd probably give up. I'm not as patient as you on that front.
Man, some things I have patience with. With people, I don't have as much, you know, which is something I need to work on at work. You know?
All right. So, yeah, those were a couple of topics that I thought we should bring up. I thought that they were interesting conversation points that came up since our previous episode. And yeah, I hope people have learned something. I hope that people learn that sometimes the value of things can be significantly different to your own personal opinion. And I hope people also realize that if it's too good to be true, it probably is, but that still doesn't mean that it automatically is too good to be true. As long as everyone approaches it with a healthy dose of skepticism, I think that's the best you can hope for.
And one last quick thing. Sometimes you might actually get this item in the mail when it finally comes to you, and you still might not be sure, well, okay, is this real or is this fake? And so there are sometimes you have to be able to be willing to spend a little additional money. Like, for example, there's a few that I've bought that I've paid money to ship to Rich, the other person doing this podcast, right? So he could compare it to his real ones and let me know if they're legit or not, right? And yeah, that cost me money to send it to him, and it cost me money for him to send it back to me. But it was worth it to know for sure. And so if I can get my money back if I needed to, thankfully I didn't need to. But you got to be willing to go the extra step sometimes. That's all. Yeah.
And on the flip side, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Sometimes it's best to leave your head in the sand, right?
Yeah, sure.
I know some people that get really good bargain prices for some things, and they arrive and they're not 100% sure that it's authentic, but it's good enough for them. They'd rather not know. They're just happy. Instead of paying $3,000 for the legit thing, they might have spent $150 on something that might be sketchy, but for $150, they're willing to leave their head in the sand about it. And that's okay too.
Yeah, if it makes them happy, man, go for that. That's what I say. Yeah.
For the right price, if you spend $3,000 on that item, you probably might want to make sure that you got your money's worth. But yeah, look, there's like I mentioned about those reprints on eBay. Some people, they don't really give a shit about owning the authentic thing for $500. They'd rather pay $19 for a reprint. And although I don't particularly like that, I'm not going to try to convince people who don't want to spend $500 on a piece of paper to spend $500 on a piece of paper. If all they like is the design, they don't need something that's authentic that was sold at the concert. They just want a good quality print to put up in a $11 frame from Michael's on their wall. So be it. As long as they're not getting ripped off. I guess it's probably not something that I'm going to lose too much sleep over.
Absolutely, man.
So, with all of that said, I think shall we check out some designs? I think that's the whole point of this episode. I think we should maybe spend some time reviewing some of these wonderful designs from the Europe 2017 leg.
Let's do it, man.
Okay, first on the chopping block, we have Slane from Ireland.
Well, before I even get into that, let me ask you one thing. And by the way, I'm not someone who's asking you a question without looking at your website. I'm looking at it right now, so I'm reading the information before I ask you this, so I'm not wasting your time. It doesn't mention anything about the distressed look, and as you know, this is one that I don't have yet. So let me ask you this: is it fucked up looking because the rain damaged yours, or is this how it's meant to look? Like, you see how it's like a little bit dirty and dingy kind of?
Right. No, it's got that distressed look.
Oh, okay.
The picture that I've got up on my website is a scan of a Slane lithograph in near mint condition.
I see. So, okay.
I think that there's clearly several designs from the entire tour that have got that intentional distressed look. Some are a little bit more prominent than others. I think some designs, in fact, from this leg that we'll get to later on, have got a real sort of intentionally beat up look to them, like they've been mistreated. Whereas others, they've just got a bit of a weathered look, if you know what I mean. And Slane is that. It's just an intentional weathered look.
Okay. I do like at the top where it says Guns N' Roses. I like the black and the gold behind it. You can see, right? The black and gold look to that that particular design that they used. I know you're not a fan of that font. I know you prefer the classic font, but I think this font works in this case because it's supposed to be like that medieval times, and so I think if they used the other font, they would have looked out of place here. I will say this, for the start of the tour, And to not mention not in this lifetime on the first lithograph, that's pretty interesting, actually. Right? But it actually doesn't say that on this one at all, which is a little bit unusual. For me, I gotta say, I'm not the biggest fan of this one. I mean, of course, I'm still after it, yes. But I think it works better on the T-shirt because the T-shirt has the black background and everything. But I don't know. And the other thing that I noticed about this one, and not that I'm saying everything has to be symmetrical, it doesn't have to be, right? But if you look at like the stuff in the background, it's not symmetrical from one side to the other. Again, that might be fully intentional, and if that's the case, hey, that's cool. But if it's meant to be, it's kind of weird that it's a little bit that's not. And I thought it was, because if you look at the very top of it, that looks symmetrical. And I'm talking like that beige background, right?
Right.
But the bottom is a little bit off, actually, and even on the sides. But anyway, that's kind of nitpicking. But I like that at the bottom, those three little triangle circle things, right? On the left and right. I thought that was a nice little flourish to add, I guess. And it's kind of weird, by the way, how the dragon heads, I guess, because I think it's supposed to be one dragon with three heads, right? That's what my
I think it is
understanding. Yeah. But the dragon on the left and the right have different scales than the dragon in the middle. But, or the heads of the dragon have different scales on them or whatever. That's kind of interesting. But, so I know you've talked to Arian Bueller a few times in your life before, and not just verbally, but also in writing and stuff. So was it supposed to be Dublin or was it supposed to be Slane? Which is the error and which is what it's supposed to say?
No, look, I think that it's probably a product of the fact that Slane is one of those venues that probably for an international audience, for a non-Irish audience, you probably just assume or are under the impression that Slane Castle is in Dublin. It's only it's a few miles out of Dublin.
I see.
And so I suppose for someone who's not from the region, it's perfectly understandable to assume that it's part of Dublin, but technically speaking, it's Slane, and it's a different location. I'm guessing it's probably similar to, like maybe MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. Like the Giants play there, the Jets play there. But it's technically, New York Giants and the New York Jets, but they technically play in New Jersey.
Right.
For most people, they probably don't care that there's a distinction between the two. However, I think in this situation, the original concept was, okay, they're going to be playing in Ireland. They're going to be playing in a venue that is just outside of Dublin. Maybe Arian, this is just my speculation. It never came up in discussion with Arian in any of my conversations with him. But I'm guessing that Guns N' Roses management probably just worked with the concept of playing in Dublin. And then later on, they decided that, maybe we should be more specific and seeing as Slane Castle is a very famous venue, that they should, work on specifying that it's going to be at Slane rather than just generally in the Dublin area.
I see.
So I would suspect that, Dublin wasn't necessarily a mistake. It was just a preliminary version of the design.
Okay, right. The only reason I even ask, well, not only because I'm aware of what his Instagram said, of course, but also at the top of the lithograph it says Slane Castle. So that's why I figured in the middle then it would say Dublin, then because it already says Slane at the top, right? But that's fine if they want to mention it twice, and there's no harm in that.
Right. As far as I'm concerned, it's not one of my favorites. I think you mentioned the font, the typeface, and I think. Yeah, I think the deal breaker for me is simply the typeface. I think we've sort of all seen the typeface or font used at local Irish pubs, or in signs that they put up at bars on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
And that sort of font to me is very cliched, and this font as well, even though it is different to that sort of pub font, it's a font that I see a lot, and it just feels a little too cliched to me. And, the Litho already has a very reasonable Irish feel to it. I'd love to see it done with another font, one that isn't so, on the nose, so to speak. Yeah, it's a shame. It's certainly not terrible, but it doesn't hit all the right buttons for me. On top of that, I know it's like you mentioned it. I know it's clearly invoking a very medieval feel by having the dragons, but for me, dragons make me think more of Wales than Ireland. To me, yeah, I think of Wales when I see dragons, not Ireland. So I think that plays a little bit on my mind too. Regardless, it's still one of the scarcest lithographs. It rained all day the day of the concert.
Yeah.
So a lot of people passed on buying the lithograph. If it's going to get ruined by the rain, why waste €50 purchasing it? So people who bought them, who went through hell to protect it the entire day from the rain and to get it home safely, I might add. Like I mentioned, Slane is not particularly close to the heart of Dublin, so you've got to take care of it for maybe an additional couple of hours to get it home, on top of the 3 hours nursing it during the Guns N' Roses concert, and potentially the 2 or 3 hours before that, waiting for Guns N' Roses to take the stage in the first place. It would have been a real pain in the ass to keep it safe for a lot of people. And so I know a lot of people get emotionally attached because they know how tough it was to get their hands on one. And so, yeah, it's tough. It's hard to find someone with one, and even harder to find someone with one who is willing to let it go.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, from Ireland, let's move to Spain, specifically the next design, Bilbao. Look, I absolutely love this design. I really like the reference because it's something very specific to the Basque region. The acrobelt is not just a spirit from, Spanish mythology. It's specifically from the folk mythology of the Basque people. And I'm a sucker for those very specific regional references. I could have probably lived without the drawings of crazy skeletons having sex sketched into the horns, but I still think that they're pretty cool. And, Guns N' Roses are meant to be irreverent anyway. And I like the limited color palette. So, overall, just a really cool litho to me.
Before I ever actually finally had one, the first word that came to my mind was mythical, because other than you, I didn't know anyone that owned one, and so I almost thought like it was not even real. You know what I mean? Right.
And I said to you on multiple occasions, if I didn't have one myself for a long time, if I didn't have one myself, I would have thought that it didn't exist.
Right. And which is kind of weird because there's 250 of them, so it's not the highest, but it's not the lowest print volume, and so. I don't know. I guess there's just a lot of people out there that either kept theirs or maybe they've gotten damaged and thrown away. That reminds me of something I wanted to mention earlier with the Kobe one. We're all like, oh, who bought it? Who's the person that spent $9,000 on it? There's a lot of people I know out there who are big collectors, but keep everything totally private, man. So, maybe there's a lot of people out there that own this, then they just keep it all to themselves, and that's cool. That's their business, of course, right? But yeah, the colors, like, it's just... The only thing I don't like about this one, which is a small thing, because believe me, I fucking love this one. But and I'm glad your website. I don't know if you darkened it because it's not as dark in real life, right? It's a bit like if there could be a color such as light black, I might call it that, right? You know what I mean? But I wish it was like in real life, like a darker black in that background. But still, no. Just a stunner, man.
Yeah.
And very desirable one. I think everyone's after it. I
think it's a really nice design, and so much so that it's a shame that it's so rare, because I think it deserves to be appreciated by more people.
Oh yeah. I mean, designs like this make me totally understand why people want like a coffee book with all designs in it or something, because you're right. It needs to, I know why people want to be able to look at it and appreciate it, but not everyone has the money to spend to get one, if you even have a chance to get one, regardless of how much, so yeah, maybe that coffee book will happen one day. We'll see.
Well, fingers crossed. It might come as a free gift with Guns N' Roses' next album.
And I like what you said about the about how it's tied into the region, because I know you and I had this discussion, fairly recently, sometime this year anyway, if you call that recent, about I think it was Metallica lithographs and how I was saying, oh, some of the designs are pretty cool, and they are, but they're rarely tied into anything to do with where those concerts are taking place,
Right.
And even some Pearl Jam ones, which are really popular, sometimes aren't either, and not that it has to be, but I think it's just kind of cool when it is, that's all.
Pearl Jam, Metallica, and Dave Matthews. They've all got very strong sort of lithograph collector followings, and they all very frequently pump out designs that have got nothing to do with the city involved. And to me, the designs can be cool, but I want them to invoke some sort of feeling for the venue or the city that the concert is being played in. And that's why I think I gravitate more towards Guns N' Roses designs, because more often than not, there is that connection to the city.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I'm glad you like the design as well. I think that there's quite a few people that don't share our sentiment for the design, which is a shame. But to each their own.
Yep.
Okay. Next up, we have Lisbon, Portugal.
Well, and I know we're going to get into a print run in a moment, but one quick thing I'll say about that, this one has 100 more than the last one did, and yet, for my personal experience and journey, if you want to call it that, this one's harder to find than even that one is, which I don't understand, because one, I don't think it's, in my personal opinion, I don't think it's as cool of a design, and two, like I said, there were 100 more made, but yet this one is very hard to find. Now, in my personal opinion, again, I like the fact, I know what it's based off of, based on your website and everything, and so that's really cool and everything. Again, it has that tie-in, right, that we were talking about. But, I don't know. I mean, I think it's all right and all. One thing I didn't notice until the other day when I was doing the notes for this podcast, I didn't notice that the necklace was the bullets, right? I only saw that now. That's pretty cool. I don't know, it's all, again, even though I'm saying it's all right, I still wanted to complete my collection, of course, but I don't know, my personal opinion, I just think it's all right. I don't know, what do you think?
I like the fact that it does a great job of referencing Mucha. I think Arian did a really good job with reproducing the colors in his style. I think some of the coloring techniques that he uses for example, the flowers and the hair make it almost look like it's a stained glass window. And, that to me looks beautiful. However, I'm not a fan of the nose. The nose just doesn't seem right to me. And I know it's a skull, and that kind of eliminates the potential of having a normal protruding nose. But I don't know if he had come up with another solution that maybe made the nose section a little less jarring, it would have really won me over.
Right.
But otherwise, it is definitely a beautiful design, and I think it has such a feminine quality to it, even if the face is kind of grotesque, is a grotesque skull. I think it's feminine enough that it may be more popular than some of the more masculine designs. And maybe that contributes to its scarcity.
That could be it. That could explain it, man.
Because I think that's we'll get to it later in the episode. But I think that is a major contributing factor to why the Paris lithograph is so popular. Is that it's a very feminine design, and I think there's you're not just competing with the typical male Guns N' Roses fan, but you're probably competing with a large female population that want to get their hands on a copy of the lithograph as well. And I don't know, maybe I would think that that's at least partially responsible for its scarcity, but who knows? Sometimes there's just no explaining it. Like we said with Bilbao, there's no discernible reason why it should be so comparatively difficult to find, but it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, strangely enough, we went from Spain to Portugal, and now with the next design, we go back to Spain. It's one of the quirks of the tour is that this particular section of the leg, they sort of zigzagged between Spain and Portugal. So we're back in Spain, and we are looking at the Madrid design. And this one is very close to my heart on so many levels. I'm a huge Salvador Dali fan to begin with. I remember, spending hours flipping through books on surrealist art in the school library as a kid. So, to see Arian do such an amazing job invoking Guns N' Roses, but retaining such a vivid reference to Dali is just beyond words. I think yellow and blue work really well together. I know they're not complementary colors, but the combination really pops to me. And the coolest aspect to me, I think, which I admit is probably not something people can pick up on unless maybe they see the lithograph in person, is that Arian added an effect to the design to give the illusion that it's real paint on canvas.
Yep.
You can see the canvas texture coming through the design, and not only that, but you can see a little bit of impasto. You can see where the paint is thick in some parts and less so in others.
So cool.
I think it's amazing detail, considering that it's at the end of the day it's just a print. It's not a real painting. So to be able to invoke those things purely through design is awesome. And it's just a shame that it's so rare and so expensive that more people won't get to appreciate this design in person because it's so damn scarce.
I was looking at it the other day, and I was like, "Is it just me? Am I insane, or is that actually going on?" Right? Because I know we all know very well this painting that it's based off of, right? So that's why I was kind of wondering, am I just like, is my own mind adding that effect in right now, right? But it really is cool, and excluding Paris, I'll call this one the last of the big four. It's kind of weird to me that usually with a GNR tour, the rare ones are kind of interspersed throughout the tour. But in this case, it's like the first four that are like, I don't know why, but there was something about it, obviously. But yeah, it's just, no offense to the artist, but I'll call it awesome and yet also very simple. But, it's just, it just really worked out very well. And obviously a lot of people must like it because most people are hanging on to it. You don't really see them for sale. One cool thing that I noticed just now, you see where it says Madrid? Like right behind it, you can see like the shadow of Madrid. You see like the black lettering, right? Yeah, that's pretty cool. One thing I don't know, in the original painting as well as the lithograph, like in the original painting, it's on top of the stopwatch that's lying there, and the lithograph is on top of the roses. Are those supposed to be like flies or something, or ants? Or
I think they're ants. Yeah, I think they're ants. Yeah,
see. All right. But yeah, stellar. And if anyone's out there that has one, I'm still after one. So please feel free to reach out. Yep.
Very beautiful. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. What have we got next? Next we have Zurich, Switzerland. Look, this is another design that wins me over purely because of my love for art. Dada is another art style that stood out to me when I was young. So to see it used for, of all things, a Guns N' Roses poster design, especially for a cool city like Zurich, it doesn't get much better in my opinion. It's also one of the brighter designs, but still retains, a fairly limited color palette. There's clearly a tendency to lean towards blacks and darker designs for Guns N' Roses merchandise. So to see a good bright design feels like a bit of a breath of fresh air. And with the shirt too, I might add, the Litho shirt for Zurich was white instead of black. And before I forget, actually, I forgot to mention for Madrid, one of the cool things about Madrid is that the lithograph shirt for that design is not only is that also hard to find, but the design on the back of the shirt is very, very cool. It sort of takes into account that melted clock soft watch design for the back of the shirt, so it sort of melts away, which I think is very, very cool. And nice. That's something that you don't get to see on any merchandise except for the shirt. So yeah, Madrid shirt and the Zurich shirt, they're both very, very cool things to get. If you can get your hands on one of them, I definitely recommend grabbing one if you can.
Yeah, I'm looking at mine right now. I somehow, even though I took a picture of it, obviously, I never noticed that, but that is really cool. Yep. That's like the cool. Blood logo, yep, but it's like, it's all like wavy or melting, like you said. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, and even the front of the shirt. And by the way, this was before they started doing like their latest design, where it's just the chest, thing, and then everything's on the back, right? But in this case, the front of the shirt is the lithograph, but at the bottom, you see at the bottom of the lithograph is like brown or whatever, like the color of the ground. The bottom of the shirt, like that brown's like melting down the shirt too. Like it's right. pretty interesting. Yeah, I never noticed that, but very cool.
Very cool,
man. And for Zurich, I like the fact one. You see how there's in the Zurich design there's two roses? I like the one one's like a lighter color. That's kind of nice that they did that. Actually, there's three roses. I see one on the top now too. That's black and white. But one thing I noticed, I wonder if like you see on the top right of this lithograph, like the musical notes in the background. I wonder if that's random or if that's actually like a GNR song. I can't read.
That's a good question.
I mean, I can't read music, so I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
but,
I can't read music either, but that would be. That would be an interesting question to find an answer to.
Right. And I don't know, like on the bottom right, that upside down watch or clock or whatever, if there's any significance to that time. And also, like, I don't know if you can see it, because of course, my shit's all buried away, so I don't have the actual lithograph in front of me. But the bullets that make up like the teeth of the skull, there's something written on them, but I can't really make out what it is. I don't know if it's anything significant or just random. But I never really noticed that till the other day. But again,
I'll have to dig mine out and have a look at the real thing and see whether I can pick out any discernible words.
Bust a magnifying glass out,
yeah.
Right? I mean, yeah. But you're right. Yeah, it is nice to see like a different color shirt from them once in a while. So that is. You're right. This one they nailed it, and yeah, I'm a big fan of the Dada kind of art as well. For me, kind of I'm a big fan of art in general, but especially like what I would call like alternative kind of art. So surrealism, Dada, all that kind of stuff. Yep, totally, man.
I think it Dada, especially in this instance, has got a bit of a punk feel to it, and everyone knows how much I love punk, so it was always going to win me over.
Yes, right. Like this is almost kind of like a flyer that they could have made back in the day or something, right? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
So. Excellent. Okay. And so we move from Switzerland to a new country. We move to Italy. The next one is Imola, specifically Imola Racecar, seeing as this particular concert had two designs. Let's hear it. What are your thoughts on the Imola Racecar, Tim?
Well, one, I mean, I totally understand the reason for the design with, again, the relation to the particular location and to Italy in general and Ferraris and stuff. Like, so I get that. That being said, and I don't think I'm in the minority here, it's definitely not one of my favorites. I do like how he dealt with making it look like they're going fast with the streaks of the paint and everything. That's cool. That's really nice. I like that. Other than that, I'm not a giant fan of it. And I don't think I'm alone in that feeling. But
You're not. Aesthetically, this design doesn't do much for me at all either. However, thematically, I love the reference. I mean, I know this is a very popular and in fact very expensive lithograph for those trying to buy one for their collection. But yeah, to be honest, I don't find myself drawn to it that much. The colors are definitely great, but I think the combination of the subject matter and the typeface used really push it away from me liking it. I mean, I love motorsports and cars in general. I'm not really into Ferrari, so having a red Ferrari on the poster doesn't score many points for me. Like you said, it makes sense for the venue. However, I'm not a Ferrari fan, so in fact, I'm very much anti-Ferrari. There's I love cars, but usually they're of the German variety. So yeah, having a Ferrari on the poster isn't going to win me over. But I do know that it is extremely popular for some Guns N' Roses fans, some Italian fans, and some motorsport fans as well. I know a couple of motorsport fans that purchased this purely because it had a Ferrari on it. When I say that, I mean people that are not necessarily Guns N' Roses fans. They're more Ferrari fans, and because they found out that it had a Ferrari design, a Ferrari car on the design, they decided to hunt it down. It's a little bit similar to one person I know who's a big Formula One fan, and he's not a Guns N' Roses fan at all. However, he decided to get himself a copy of the Abu Dhabi lithograph because it's got a Formula One car on it. So, this certainly would appeal to a large, several large demographics, Ferrari fans, Italian fans, and then, of course, Guns N' Roses fans. But, just personally, it doesn't really do too much for me. It's nice, but I'm probably starting to sound like a broken record here, but like many other designs, I'd probably much rather see Guns N' Roses written in the classic GNR font. Right. Look, right. I think most design people know already. I think most designs would probably work better if they had the classic GNR font, but that's just my personal preference.
But yeah, you're right. Like in this particular instance, I think they could have used the classic font, and I don't think it would have looked out of place. Like how, in my opinion, I think it would have looked out of place on the Slane one. But the other thing about this one that I do kind of like, at the top of it, in the background, like the sunset or whatever it's supposed to be, like how it uses those like geometric circular shapes. You see that, Right. I kind of like that effect. There's a very rare Van Halen lithograph that has that same thing going on in it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool that they did that with this one. But you're right, though. Yeah, which for Bueller is pretty rare, but in my opinion, it's swing and a miss. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it is for at least, I'm guessing, about 150 people out there. It's a killer design, so much so that it's really hard to find one available for purchase.
Oh yes. Right.
Okay, well, let's move on to the other design for Imola. Like I mentioned, Imola had two designs, one of the rare venues, rare concerts that ended up with two lithograph designs instead of one. The next design is the Imola skull, or the Imola Cannibal Holocaust. Aesthetically, again, it's probably not going to win too many people over. However, I love it purely because of the reference.
Right.
I love horror films. I think the giallo genre is an extremely important, iconic segment of the history of horror film. So to see it used as a reference is very, very cool. It's just, it's probably just a shame that a lot of people don't even realize this litho exists. I know a lot of people who went to the concert and didn't even take notice of it. I think everyone probably saw the Ferrari race car design and fell in love with that. And not too many people even noticed that there was a second design available. I know that the race car lithograph sold out, but I'm not entirely sure if this one did. So it may very well be one of the scarcest designs from the entire tour, simply because it was overshadowed by the other design that they were selling.
Pretty interesting. I think if people didn't know, and a lot of people didn't know the reference right off the bat when this concert happened, I think people thought it was like buku, bonkers, fucking crazy, right? But once you understand the reference, right, it makes a lot more sense. And it's actually a pretty clever combination of the bullet logo and of the top of the skull and the roses, and everything. And I think that it worked really well, actually, how he did this one. Still, certainly not my favorite. And I understand why there's the creases in it. It's meant to look like an unfolded, in this case, old movie poster. But still, I think it could have done without the creases and still looked fine. Not just the creases, by the way, but the other effects of making it look old, like with those marks on the right hand side and stuff. But
yeah, I'll agree with you there.
I'll give it marks for something different at least and interesting. I can respect when an artist just tries to go with something different, right? Because there's probably like,
Right.
I mean, I don't know much about that region of Italy. I'm guessing there's a million things he could have done, but he chose to do something kind of, off the beaten path, and I like people that take chances like that. And so from that regard, I can respect it. Yeah.
I'm trying to rack my brain, and I'm not 100% on this, so please don't quote me. But I think that the genesis of using Cannibal Holocaust as a theme for this poster came from Slash's involvement with horror films.
I didn't think about that, but yeah, that's a good point. He is very much involved. Yeah.
I think, like, I can't remember the specific conversation I had with Arian, but I'm pretty sure it did come up. Like, if I'm just imagining that topic, that could very well be the case. But I'm pretty sure it did come up in conversation, and I'm pretty sure Arian did mention that that was what he started with, and that's what gave him the idea of using the Cannibal Holocaust poster design as a reference for this particular lithograph. And you mentioned that some people didn't recognize the reference. I didn't recognize the reference. It took me months after for me to put my finger on it, because I would look at it constantly and think, man, this looks familiar, but I can't put my finger on it. And it was months later before I realized that it was a reference to Cannibal Holocaust.
Oh, wow. Very interesting.
So I don't blame anyone. I don't blame anyone for not noticing the reference and for thinking that it's just strange. But it's not as strange as people think. There is a reason behind it. There is a reference, and it's purely because of that reference that I like it. For those who don't, I don't blame you. It is an acquired taste, to say the least.
Man.
Okay. Well, that's Italy done for. We are now moving on to Germany, one of the several Germany concerts over the course of the Not in This Lifetime tour. Germany was definitely one of the handful of countries that got multiple concerts. Yeah, Tim, what are your thoughts?
Unbelievably amazing. Now, I think I know what you're going to say about this one, and how, even though we understand the reference, but that reference does not have much to do with Munich because of where that castle actually is, right? And I guess that is a little, jarring when you think about that. And I'm guessing I don't know if that castle has anything to do with death or why the Reaper's there. That could just be like a GNR thing, I guess. Ever since those Australia shows, the Reaper's kind of been involved in some designs, I guess. But I just think, like, the color in the background, like, I guess, like the sunset or whatever is happening, everything about it is just unbelievable to me. I think it's just so killer. I also like, if you look on the right-hand side, and like towards like kind of where the middle of the right-hand side, there's that little hole in the tree, and you can see like very faintly in the background, you can see like two little sets of eyes in that hole in the tree.
Yes.
I just think that's really cool too, man. Like, just, I love this one wholeheartedly, man.
I'm a little conflicted with it, and you mentioned it already. I think it certainly does look beautiful. I think the colors are kick-ass, but Neuschwanstein Castle is, like you mentioned, not in Munich. However, that being said, it is still in Bavaria. Munich is the home of Bavaria. And so technically speaking, the castle is representative of the region. It's just not representative of the city. And I would have preferred to have seen a theme more representative of Munich. We have discussed this many times previously, where sometimes, especially for international concerts, the themes can end up being a little more broad. It might encompass the entire state or the entire country as opposed to the city that the concert is in. And I think that's fine, but especially for Germany, one of only a very short list. There's a very, very short list of countries on the Not in This Lifetime tour that got more than one concert. And Germany is one of them on that list. And I think that because of that, especially because of that, I think the theme should have been a little bit more Munich as opposed to Bavaria in general. But I'm being picky because, it is certainly a beautiful design with great colors. And the only thing that, not the only thing, but one additional thing that I found a little bit quirky is that if you look at all of the Europe designs from both 2017 and 2018, nearly all of them have got the identical white border, that they all, nearly all have the same width white border. However, Munich is noticeably thicker. It's got a much distinctly thicker white border and I don't really know why. Like all of the other, there's many others designed by Arian Buehler, and nearly all of them have got the exact same dimensions and therefore have got the same thickness of border. If it had been like a different artist that had done it, then I could maybe understand, okay, that's just the thickness of border he prefers or something. But this is, Arian, and he's clearly done many of the other designs, and nearly all of them have got the same identical border. Yeah, I don't really know why this one has got a thicker border to it. Not that it really makes a difference, but, when you look at it as a whole, as a collection, and you look at all of the designs side by side, it's these subtleties that come out, that stand out, and it always makes me question, what's the reason behind it? Is there a particular reason why this design above all the others ended up with a thicker, more prominent border?
It is kind of weird because, like, if you look at the borders of this one, it seems to me like it could have easily been expanded to have been like the regular border, yeah. Right?
Right.
There's nothing about it that would have made it like a technical challenge that doesn't look like anyway to me. So yeah, that is kind of strange.
Is it intentional? Is it accidental?
Right,
who knows? It's odd. And yet another one that is extremely hard to find.
Yeah.
So if you need one, if you want one, yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yep.
Okay. We will be returning to Germany. However, for the time being, we will be leaving and going on to London, England. As is customary for our review episodes, I've managed to drag one of my friends kicking and screaming onto the show as a guest. He hails from England and went to both the London shows. Nick, I'm sorry to drag you into this, but welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Of course, I'd love to hear your opinion on the London lithograph designs, as well as your personal experience seeing them live on consecutive nights at Olympic Stadium. Uh-huh. But before we rush into all of that, I'd like to learn more about you and your Guns N' Roses fandom, I suppose. Guns N' Roses clearly has fans all over the world, and I find it sort of fascinating to see how Guns N' Roses has worked their way, not just into different people's lives and to some extent their cultures, but also managed to, I suppose, transcend generations.
Absolutely.
I say this because, unlike my previous guests, who have all been roughly the same age as myself, you are significantly younger. We don't need to necessarily go into specifics, but suffice it to say, I'm pretty sure you grew up with a different Guns N' Roses. So I'd like to hear your origin story, perhaps give us slightly older crowd, a glimpse into what Guns N' Roses fandom is like for the next generation. So yeah, please let us know how did someone, as young as yourself, get into Guns N' Roses?
Well, yeah, just to sort of come back on that point, I think this has been the first time for a while that I've been described as younger. I'm 31 years old, so I was born in 1989, so kind of right at what many people would argue is kind of the peak of Guns N' Roses, really. So I think for me, it kind of started when I was probably about 14, so 2003, 2004 is kind of when I sort of got into them. I can't remember exactly what the very first thing was, because obviously growing up, I was fully aware of the Sweet Child of Mine, the big hits, November Rain, etc. But I didn't know much about the bands, and I think it was kind of around 2003. A couple of things just kind of set in, they kind of set into motion where you hear a little bit here, you hear a little bit there, and as you're kind of growing up as 13 or 14-year-olds, you're quite impressionable. So I think that's probably the thing that really started to get me into it. I remember the two real things actually that kind of are the ones that solidified it for me is actually kind of backwards, and I think a lot of the hardcore fans may be quite amazed to know this is how I got into it. So in the sort of summer of 2004, when Contraband came out, I was on a family holiday because I was 14 at the time, and my brother bought Contraband when it came out, and we were just listening to it all the time. And I remember because they were on Slither, would always be on Kerrang TV, and we'd get home from school and watch that. And I remember looking at it going, oh, I recognise these guys. And my brother said, oh, yeah, that's Slash and Duff from Guns N' Roses. And he didn't really know Matt Sorum at all. So, yeah, Slash and Duff from Guns N' Roses. And, yeah, we spent all summer listening to the album. And then kind of later on in the year, The Greatest Hits came out, which is kind of embarrassing to say that was my first actual Guns N' Roses album. Well, whether you consider an actual Guns N' Roses album or not is a different story. But, yeah, so when I got that album, I downloaded it to my iPod, and I remember one evening actually coming home from one of my friends' houses and just sitting on the bus home and sort of listening to that album go through. And although kind of in retrospect it's not the greatest track list, I think it was kind of it. I remember specifically it was on that track list going from Civil War into Don't Cry, and just thinking there was so much depth to this, and they weren't just Welcome to the Jungle and Sweet Child of Mine. They just had more depth, and that was the thing where I was just like, it was kind of like a bit of a life-changing moment. They were probably the first band that I was obsessed with. Growing up a bit younger, I was into like Nirvana and Red Hot Chili Peppers and stuff, but Guns N' Roses was the first one where it was like, it just kind of spoke to me. And obviously at the sort of time, they were not cool. Let's be clear, really not cool. If anything, I was made fun of for liking it, because that's probably the height of them being uncool, I'd say, really. Especially for sort of my age, you'd never see them. They had like a timeless cool, but in terms of where they were at that point, not cool. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into them, which is kind of again, I imagine a lot of sort of the hardcore fans that have been around since, been fans since the early 80s to know that someone in London in 2003, 2004 is kind of speaking to them as well. I think, as you said before, it really does kind of transcend genres, transcend geographical locations. I think what really resonates is kind of different to different people. So for me, I think what it was the attitude was one thing, the kind of rebellious attitude, especially being kind of 14 years old. That's a big part of like the whole kind of fuck you to the man. That's kind of what I felt like at the time. And that stuck with me, and that stuck with me ever since.
It's interesting that you actually mentioned that, because I certainly felt that same rebellious attitude. However, my introduction to Guns N' Roses was several years before yours. But I also remember listening to other genres, but then finding Guns N' Roses and getting into them, even though I know there, like you said, there's that moment where they were possibly uncool. It was mm-hmm. a little bit strange to be listening to them in the era of grunge, I suppose, and mm-hmm. Probably harder stuff, or at least a different genre. And yeah, I certainly remember times where I was sort of looked at as a little bit different because I was listening to Guns N' Roses still. But mm-hmm. It's good to know that maybe 10 years on from that, it happened all over again, that maybe people were listening to completely other stuff, but there was still a small group of people that were happy to discover Guns N' Roses.
Absolutely. To be honest, I think as well, if you think about it again, say I was 10 years after you with my side, I'm sure that 10 years after me, someone's having the exact same kind of epiphany. It's impacting someone in the same way. Another part of the world, maybe in sort of Eastern Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in 2014, that I'm sure that's happening again. This music although it's kind of, some of it can be kind of dated to a specific time, it's timeless in its message, and it's timeless in kind of some of the values. So I think, yeah, it's, as I said, although maybe at the time it was considered uncool, it was always cool, but in specific times less prominent, I guess I'd say.
It's again, also very interesting that you mentioned that, the cyclical nature of it, that maybe there's 10 years difference between you and myself, but then there may very well be 10 years difference between you and the so-called next generation of fans.
Exactly.
And I actually find, with all due respect to you, I find that next generation probably even more interesting, simply because you're starting with that sort of age difference. You're starting to look at children of fans.
Absolutely.
And that, I've certainly gone to several concerts where there have been numerous people that were certainly young enough to be my kids, and to see them rocking out with, I'm assuming their parents, it's a bit surreal. I being a Guns N' Roses fan and knowing their, I suppose, lost potential, they had that potential to be possibly as big as, the Rolling Stones. That's always the comparison that people like to make. And you go to a Rolling Stones concert, and there will be people, 7 to 70 rocking out to Rolling Stones. And I don't think, even as a Guns N' Roses fan, that sort of image doesn't come up in my head. I don't imagine, that's not the first thing I think of when I think of Guns N' Roses fans. I usually have this image of roughly everyone the same age rocking out in front of Axl, and doesn't really stand out as a possibility, but it certainly is when you're actually right there in the crowd. You look around, and it's not a sea of people all the same age as yourself. It certainly is varied, and I think that's nothing but a good thing.
Absolutely. I mean, and going back to your point in terms of looking at the sort of demographic, I know we're going to come on to the London shows, but those were probably the biggest shows I've seen for Guns N' Roses, maybe slightly smaller than Download, but being like a single one-off show, it was all different ages, genders, ethnicities. It was kind of, I think that was kind of like a bit of a full circle moment for it being kind of, this appeals to everyone. And I think we both know there's nothing as fun and enjoyable as a live rock show, and who better than, I know you said the sort of lost potential, but maybe that's part of the appeal. There's kind of what attracted to me was kind of, especially at the time in sort of 2003, 2004, once I sort of went onto the internet and understood what was going on, it was kind of the whole thing of, this album's coming and he's gonna prove them all wrong. He's got this masterpiece, he's gonna prove them all wrong. And that was kind of the attitude that I enjoyed, the underdog nature at that point.
So naturally, being a fan that got into Guns N' Roses slightly later on down the road, that would mean that your first Guns N' Roses concert would have probably been, I suppose, sans Guns and mostly just Rose, I suppose, right?
Absolutely. So yeah, the first show I went to was Paris in 2006. So I got into them in 2003, 2004, but this was kind of in the infamous quiet period where, a sighting was rarer than Bigfoot. So it was a massive deal for me. And I remember at the time, I was 16 for the first show I went to, and I actually got my dad to write me a note to excuse me from school. So me and my brother was at university and was home for summer at the time, and we took a Eurostar and went to Paris for the weekend and saw it. And it was, as a 16-year-old kid, your first show is Guns N' Roses, and it was opened for by Bullet for My Valentine, who are a UK band, and Avenged Sevenfold, who are sort of on the rise. And it was just, again, it's one of those things where it's like, this is me going to these shows, this is what I want. You kind of feel the most alive you've ever felt. And I said, especially being a 16-year-old kid, kind of traveling, not necessarily traveling Europe, but going into Europe when I should be at school, was just like, again, it's going back to the attitude. It felt like that. I was like, I'm not going to listen. I'm going to do what I want. And that was, it was incredible. And that was, as you said, this was a time when it was kind of Axl and friends. So this was the lineup that included Robin Fink, Richard Fortus, Bumblefoot was his first tour. Brain was still on drums, which was ace. And it was fantastic. It was absolutely brilliant.
That Paris show, was that in the summer? What month was that show in? Do you remember?
That was, I do. It's my first gig. I remember the date. So it was the 20th of June, 2006.
The late sunset and the bright nights in Europe in summer. Is that your sort of stereotypical image of a concert?
That's a good question, really.
Because I find that, at least in recent years, a lot of the big bands, when they come visit Japan, it tends to be like unless they're going to a rock festival, which is almost always in the summer anywhere in the world, I suppose, they will come to Japan. Technically, I suppose in the off season they would come when it's winter or maybe autumn here. They'll play a venue, like they won't play they'll play an arena somewhere indoors. The concept of a stadium gig or an outdoor gig is a little bit foreign to Japanese fans.
Yeah.
However, I feel that for European tours, for any band, is that they'll, if they're big enough, they'll go do a stadium tour, because then they can get 50,000 people instead of 20,000 people at their shows.
Yep.
And the only way that you can get those open dates in Europe is when football isn't being played, and that means summer. But
that's true.
That means bright nights and sunset at 10 p.m., 11 p.m., etc., etc. It can get a little bit surreal for fans from other parts of the world where summer nights don't start that late.
Well, it's funny you mention that, because let's be clear, in 2006, Axl Rose was not playing stadiums. So this was one of the arenas in Paris. So in terms of kind of times of the year, I guess I'm fortunate that, because I come from London, this is kind of, I don't want to say it's the epicenter of gigs, but if it's not New York, it is London, I would say. I know I'm biased, but we get the best bands all times of the year. There's always gigs to go to. Like I've seen Guns N' Roses in May, June, July, October, so it doesn't really matter too much. But you are right about the connection with football, because that first Guns N' Roses gig I went to was probably the first England game that I'd missed in about 10 years, because they were playing the same night as England played Sweden. So in a couple of the sort of solo moments, I was looking on my phone to try and get a signal to try and get the score. But again, this is 2006, so smartphones did not exist. It was one of those kind of data phones where you have to go through their own browser, and it comes through super slow. So it was it was kind of a memorable evening for sure.
You went through the lean times, I suppose, back in the early 2000s. But that would mean, like a lot of the crowd at these This Lifetime shows, I would imagine 2016 was the first time that you got to see Axl, Slash, and Duff all on stage together.
Yeah, that's right. That was the first time I've seen Axl, Slash, and Duff together on the same stage. Again, it was. I went to the Vegas shows because the 14-year-old me was so convinced that this would never happen. I kind of made a promise, like, if this ever happens, I have to be at the first show. So yeah, I was at the Vegas shows, the first two, which was an experience. Luckily, I'd seen the three main guys play separately. So I'd seen Axl with Guns, his version of Guns, a couple of times. I'd seen Duff play with Walking Papers before, which was really, really cool. And I'd seen Slash do a couple of solo shows. But I was actually at the gig in London in 2010 where Duff came on stage, and that was absolutely bonkers. I remember kind of like me and the guy next to me just kind of look at each other, shout in each other's face. We just couldn't believe it. There was no rumours, nothing. There'd been nothing to suggest that there's any sort of mending of the bridges. So that was cool. But to see Slash on stage, I honestly never thought I would see that.
It's great that you mentioned that you went to the Vegas shows, because this makes for a good segue into the next question I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you what it was like, I suppose, being able to experience the rumor of Not This Lifetime turning into fact. Because unlike myself, I've mentioned in previous episodes that I was not following the Not This Lifetime tour all that much up until it got close to them coming to Japan. So the whole aspect of it changing from rumor to fact to them actually doing a significant tour in the U.S., this was all lost on me. I was not paying attention to that. However, the fact that you went to the Vegas shows proves that you clearly were at the forefront. You were at the vanguard of listening to these rumors, and when they came to fruition. you jumped on the next plane to the U.S. and went to those shows. So how did Not in This Lifetime sort of unfold for you?
It was quite bizarre because, as I said, I've been around since the sort of the lean times in the sort of early to mid 2000s, and so everything was kind of a bonus for me above that, to be honest. I kind of remember the rumours starting in sort of 2015, especially when DJ Ashba left. That I remember that sort of starting there, and obviously the rumours that Bumblefoot had left. I was thinking, you're starting to put it together, and the fact that Duff had played a few shows, the rumours were sort of going out there sort of late 2015, but this is Axl Rose, who's notoriously stubborn, really, and that's massive respect for it. He's pardon the pun, but he sticks to his guns. And when those rumours kind of got to the late end of the year, and then I think beginning of 2016, it was kind of, from what I remember, they just uploaded the classic logo, and it was like, oh wow, this might be on. Even then, I wasn't 100% convinced it would happen, because when I said about promising that I'd have to be at that first show, the reason is because I was just expecting it to completely blow up. So the reason is, it's like even if there were European shows in the summer of 2016 or later on in the year, there was no guarantee that those shows would happen. So I was like, I have to be on that first show, because I think it'll just completely capitulate, and I'll have to have seen it. So that's exactly why I took the plunge, and I had the most fantastic time, and it was quite surreal, actually, because I said it was something that I never thought I would see. And I do remember that sort of TMZ video when he did proclaim that it would not be in this lifetime. And so it was something that I never thought I'd see, and I'm so grateful that I did it, because it was kind of like a bit of a full circle moment of seeing different incarnations and seeing them play with their respective bands, but seeing them actually on stage together, where they belong. Let's be serious, they all belong to each other. The sum is greater than the parts, I think, with Guns N' Roses, even though I think Axl is kind of the peak in terms of his ability. The sum is greater than the parts, and I think that there are no bands like Guns N' Roses, and to actually have them on stage together was kind of like a dream come true, really.
I don't think anyone would blame you for that train of thought. That if you look back on Guns N' Roses touring history, you'll see there's a lot of history there of shows being canceled and tours not ending the way that they originally intended. So that's probably. Even though it all worked out great in the end, that's probably was a good way to think of it. That better to get your shows in while you can, just in case it all falls apart.
But it's funny, because even saying that, I distinctly remember even going to Vegas, I was like, there's no way, is there? I think the only thing that kind of really helped was when they did the Troubadour show, the sort of secret Troubadour show. That was like, okay, maybe. But then I distinctly remember on the day of the first Vegas show, because they set up the sort of merchandise stalls outside well before, like, at the sort of lunchtime. So my friend and I, I was like, oh, do you mind if we just go across the strip and have a look, see what's going on? Because I was like, this will be so limited. I'm really intrigued to see what they're doing, because if this blows up, this would be like the holy grail of merch when it all goes wrong. And I remember in that queue looking on my phone and reading that Axl had broken his foot, and I was like, I remember standing there going like, you can't. This can't have happened. I can't have got all the way to the show day and he's broken his foot. And then even later in the evening, I think, from what I remember, because I was still so jet lagged, because Vegas is 8 hours behind, and getting to the show, and the doors were closed, and it was like, okay, and they were supposed to open around about 9 or 10 from what I remember, and they didn't open till gone 11, and you had a massive crowd of people outside, and everyone was like, oh no, something. Is this not going to happen? And so even up to the very last, until they got on stage, to be honest, I didn't really think it would happen. But yeah, I'm glad to be looking back at this 5 years on almost, and being to say all the cool memories I've had from it.
Let's talk about London. You and I are not only one of the lucky few who were fortunate enough to see not just multiple shows during this tour, but also one of the few who live in a city that I suppose is big enough to justify getting 2 shows on consecutive nights. So fill us in on the inevitable chaos that was back-to-back shows in London.
Yeah, so back-to-back shows is tough. It's funny, I was actually kind of used to it, and all my friends even think I'm crazy for doing the back-to-back shows. I did back-to-back in Vegas as well, because it's like, if I'm coming all the way here, of course I'm going to see as much as I can. Like, why would I not? Like, it's there, of course. And especially because I'm not too far from the Olympic Stadium in London, so it's kind of course I'm going. Summertime, seeing my favourite band in the best city in the world. Of course I'm going. But what I do remember just being the scorching hot days. So they were very, very hot. Sort of mid-June is normally a little bit temperamental in the UK in terms of weather. It's always a bit, it can chuck it down. It can be scorching. It can be nothing. So it's a bit fortunate this time that it was really hot. Again, one thing that it's kind of now as a 31-year-old I'm a bit grateful for is like just how good transport links are to the Olympic Stadium. I did actually go to the show in Lisbon, which was I think a couple of weeks before this, if I remember correctly on that. And I remember it just being an absolute chaos trying to get there and out. But London has really, really good links. So we got in all good. Huge queues for merchandise at the front. Normally in sort of European shows, the merchandise is kind of inside, but this was all outdoors on even the walk into the stadium. So it's probably about half a mile out from the stadium you could buy some of the stuff. Huge queues going into there. But it was completely worth it, despite the fact I said it was absolutely scorching hot. It was really great. But, I think some of the people I was going with thinking it was going to be... Axe is going to be late. He's going to be there for ages, and I was like, no. He's changed. It's all good. But I remember because I was fortunate enough on the first night to have Golden Circle tickets because this is my favourite band. Like I'm a bit of a sucker that in principle I'd go, no, I'm not going to pay for Golden Circle. Of course not. Definitely not doing that. But when it comes to it, I was like, I've got to. For the second night though, I didn't. I went in the I went in the normal one, and I don't know. It was more packed and super hot again, so it was quite difficult. And I think when you kind of have a lot of that emotional release, physical and emotional release, it's quite draining. And by that second night, I think I remember actually during the knocking on heaven's door, because that's a bit of a slow number and it takes a while, I was like, I'm exhausted. I just remember standing there going, I'm absolutely exhausted now. But yeah, again, it's one of those things where you're like, life doesn't get much better than this. Your favourite band, the best city in the world.
I hate to admit it, but you mentioning knocking on heaven's door, it's become a little bit of a running joke for me and one of my friends. We've managed to go to a significant number of shows in different places in different countries. However, it unfortunately, and I feel guilty admitting this, but it's got to a point where if either of us have to go to the bathroom,
that's the time.
It's usually knocking on heaven's door, because you know that thing can run somewhere in the vicinity of 20 minutes or so. If you're going to miss out on one song, it's always going to be that one. Sad to say. Well, also, I know how much you like to be down as close as you can to the action. So especially the fact that because it's a bit of a slow number, people aren't jumping around anymore. So it's kind of you can make your way out a little bit easier. And yeah, as you said, it's quite a long one. So it's there's probably a time to get another beer as well. So and not just trying to navigate your way out, but I find that compared to a lot of other bands and their fans, Guns N' Roses fans are very courteous and very polite when it comes to getting your way back in. People recognize who you are. If you were at the rail and you've gone to the bathroom or to go get a drink or whatever, they'll recognize you and let you back all the way to the rail again. For the most part, I know that there is the occasional venue or the occasional city or possibly the occasional country where they're a little bit more rabid, and if you sacrifice your spot, you're not getting it back. I admit that, but generally, as a whole, Guns N' Roses fans are very respectful that way. That's true. But funny you say that. That first night, I'm quite a big metal fan as well, so I go to a lot of metal gigs too. And that first Guns N' Roses show, even in the Golden Circle, that's the most fights I've ever seen at a gig. There was a couple of guys that were just, it was so bizarre because they were slogging at each other, and then they'd be fine, and then the security guard would come over and tell them to stop, and they'd be fine, and then 5 minutes later they'd start again, and then another slightly bigger security guard would come and stop, and then they got kicked out,
And then they came back in and they fought again. And I think that's when this, because I think another bigger security guard came in, which I think he's the guy that actually works for the band. But it was just the most bizarre thing to watch these guys fighting, like a progressively bigger security guards come in. And by the time that final one came in, I don't think anyone was messing with him. He was huge. But going back to your point around kind of losing your spot, because this is my favorite band, I don't want to even risk that. So maybe I try not to drink too much before on the day. But again, if you're in the middle of a stadium, in the middle of a packed amount of people, and you haven't really drunk, and it's, as I said, it's scorching hot, you start to feel a little bit, especially I said, by the time Knock on Heaven's Door come around, you're like, oh man, I'm struggling a little bit here. I'm
certainly not the type of person to condone violence, especially at a concert. But I think if you really ask me, a London gig without crowd violence would be slightly disappointing.
You say that. I think, but do you know what? It's normally leveled again, sort of like Londoners, that we're a bit more docile than other places. I think it depends in some ways. For the right time, we're crazy. For the wrong time, we can be quite quiet. But this was the first Guns N' Roses show in London for, the first in brackets. Guns N' Roses show for 20 something years, so it was bound to bring out everyone that had a slight bit of interest. If they could get a ticket, they were coming. There's right.
Part of it, I will confess, part of it was the allure of the brawl breaking out at a Guns N' Roses show in Glasgow.
Absolutely.
If there's any potential for that happening, you have to be at the show, or at least I have to be at the show. So I was quite disappointed when all of that sort of evaporated, but that's certainly not Guns N' Roses' fault.
If they reschedule, that is one to go to, as you're saying, because even if there's no fights, the Scots are up for a great time, and that will be an electric crowd. So if that, fingers crossed, it does sort of come back round, and make sure you go to that one, because that'll be a good laugh. You'll make some really good friends.
Agreed. Okay, so this show is meant to be about the lithographs. So let's talk about the lithographs. We've got London Night 1 and London Night 2. Now, I know that you certainly collect these lithographs for the shows that you've gone to. What's your personal take on the aesthetics, I suppose, of London Night 1?
Yeah, so I think of all the ones, I think I've seen 9 shows on this tour, and I think London Night 1 is probably my favourite. If it's not my favourite, it's my second favourite. But I love the aesthetics of it, 'cause it sort of takes into account a lot of sort of London history with Jack the Ripper, and I love the sort of like the play on it of the top hat being for Slash, and obviously the sort of the axe on his back being his guitar and stuff. So I love that aesthetic. I think it's one of the most memorable, I'd say, and especially I think with the fortunate way that London has so much history, in so many ways, history and traditions, that is one of the coolest ones for sure. That's actually one that I haven't really put out to display at any point yet, because I still don't know the perfect way to display it. So it's kind of safely away at the moment. But it's, without a doubt, it's one of my favourites for sure.
Are you London born and bred?
I am, yeah.
Coming from the perspective of someone who is through and through a Londoner, what's your take on them using, I suppose, an infamous part of London's past as a reference point for the design?
I like it, because as I said, what I said originally about the idea of attitude, for me, this screams attitude. This is kind of like, again, I know that maybe in 2016, 2017, they probably weren't the most dangerous band in the world, but this is the most dangerous band in the world, and to have something that screams danger and kind of infamy and mythology in a way as well, I think they kind of go hand in hand. Is it distasteful? I don't think so, honestly. I think when you look at it, it goes into the kind of, I've always considered Guns N' Roses kind of underworld a little bit, and that is London's underworld personified. So I no qualms with it at all. I think if anything, it's perfect.
I'm just sort of scrolling through some of the previous designs and just trying to see whether there's anything that's that if you're particularly sensitive to to that sort of thing, whether there might be anything else that jumps out at me as potentially a source for insult. You look at the Chicago designs from 2016, and they're clearly referencing the gangster history of Chicago. Mm-hmm. I know that I've certainly got at least one friend that I know of that went to the New Jersey show in 2016 that wasn't particularly enthusiastic about putting the New Jersey Devil poster up on his wall. He thought that was a little bit demonic, but yeah.
If we talk around sort of like partisan stuff, at least Guns N' Roses, they're not going for something. Again, I noticed with some of the other lithographs, again, sport related, if Guns N' Roses had picked a football team to choose, that may have divided opinion a bit more than Jack the Ripper. So I'm glad they went for something a bit more historic.
I was thinking about the London show that was canceled, the London shows that were canceled for 2020, and them being played at Tottenham's stadium. Yeah. And I thought about that. I genuinely thought, okay, it clearly it's not anything to do with Spurs, but I wonder how many Londoners who hate Spurs would use that as a reason or justification to not see a show that they would want to see. Like they may be Guns N' Roses fans, but they're they have such anger against the club that plays at that stadium. Absolutely. That they would choose not to go to the show because of that.
It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me. But funny that I actually didn't have tickets to the 2020 show. I was kind of on the fence, but one of my friends who is an Arsenal fan, so obviously Tottenham's biggest rivals, he was the one that was imploring me to go. So I think some people are not going to take it so much, but yeah, it's definitely there. I'm telling you, those sort of rivalries are definitely there.
You mentioned that there's certainly a sporting theme to some of the Guns N' Roses designs, and I think apart from some of them genuinely being because that city is a sport mad city, I think a lot of it also is the fact that they're playing stadiums. That they're playing at these sports venues, but I don't know. I have no problem with sports being a reference for some of the designs. However, if I had to choose, I would probably want something a little bit more. I don't know, something a little bit deeper than the current sports for that particular city.
Yeah, I think it depends in some ways, because obviously at the same time there was in that tour, I think they played Imola and they had a race car, but that's because Imola's really that track is famous for motorsport, so that's a deep meaning. I don't think London's only good for sport, so I'm glad they took away from it. However, saying that, for Download the following year at Donington Park, I was so excited for a Download themed or a Donington Park themed Guns N' Roses poster, because there's so much history. Talking of distasteful, that could have been one that could have been very distasteful considering the kind of tragedies back in the late 80s, but that was probably the one that's the lithograph I'm probably the most disappointed in, because it felt very stock. This was kind of like a triumphant return for Guns N' Roses to one of the venues where they had the biggest leap. I would say that solidified them from being a good band to a great band back in the 80s, and I think that was one where I was actually quite disappointed with the design, because it just felt like it could have been anywhere. And for me personally, Donington's a fantastic place because I go to that festival every year, but also for Guns N' Roses history, and that was a missed opportunity, I'd definitely say.
So going from what is arguably one of the best designs with London Night 1, what are your thoughts on London Night 2?
I like it. It's not my favourite. Again, I love London history, so having a beefeater there and having the sort of rose in his gun and stuff is very cool, and I do like that. Again, I think they probably could have gone with some other sort of stuff in London that probably would have resonated a little bit more. The other thing, I'm not huge on the fact that it's just so dark. I like the sort of bright colours of some of the other posters that they do, and to have, I know it's kind of thematically in keeping with London Night 1 having a kind of dark theme. It's good, but it's not great. I'd happily have it on my walls, but I'd have to have it next to London Night 1 as well, if that makes sense, because they're kind of thematic. But yeah, London Night 1 definitely takes it out of the two.
I think, like, for me, the concept of consecutive shows in a city, I think that they come around so rarely that
Absolutely.
I always feel a little bit disappointed when they don't take the opportunity to link them together in some way. If you look at, I think it was the Sydney shows, you know, they obviously had the two Mad Max designs, and they clearly go together thematically, more so than, say, London Night 1 and Night 2. There's a little bit, I suppose there's a little bit of a thematic link there, but not too much. I would have preferred if some way that they had been linked a little bit more, a little bit closer in theme, because you know, you look at you look at Los Angeles, New York.
That was the one I was going to say. Yeah, the Los Angeles one that has
There's not too many cities where they play those consecutive nights, so you don't have the opportunity necessarily to link them all together. And when you do, I don't know, I would like them to take that opportunity more. I'm not too sure what would pair well with Jack the Ripper. I don't know what you could possibly put on a second lithograph that would work there, but you know, I'd certainly try anyway.
Yeah, and just as I said, like, because there's the only sort of themes between the two is really just the fact they are kind of famous London things. But you're right, I'd definitely like to see a thematic evolution if they are doing the consecutive nights, which they are. And as I've said before, I think it's the LA shows they have. I think they did 3 nights and they had Axl, Slash and Duff on each of them with a slight different theme. I thought that's the sort of ones that I think are really cool. So yeah, like as much as I kind of love London Night 1, I do wish Night 2 had been kind of similar or more closer to it. Yeah. So
looking towards 2021 and the future in general, what does the future hold for you and Guns N' Roses? Can you picture in your mind's eye another album anytime in the foreseeable future? And does that even matter to you?
Yeah, it does. It does. I think it's vital at this point that there is a new album or something that comes, because as much as it's been an absolute trip to kind of revisit the old songs, I think they need something to kind of bring more life back into it. I'm not sure if it's just kind of looking at the Guns N' Roses fans online that, you know, at times can be a little bit toxic, if it's just kind of a vocal minority that says it. But I think generally seeing how they're progressing, it's kind of people that have wanted to see the show now have seen the show, and there's not really much bringing you back. It's been great to bring like Locomotive and stuff into the set and Dead Horse, but really you want to hear new music. And for me personally, who kind of got into Guns N' Roses during the Chinese Democracy era, I'm a huge fan of that album. I think it's a flawed masterpiece, but when some of the songs leaked, I think it's sort of mid 2019, that like reignited my passion for that music as well. And I find it incredible that some of these songs have been sat there for 20 years. I can't fathom that. Like I taught you mentioned me being a younger fan now, so I'm 31. These songs were written when I was 10, and they've not seen the light of day, and they need to release something. Whether I think that's a new album of completely new material, I'm not so sure. Part of me at this point now is thinking, does Axl want to do it? Especially in the kind of recent days that Angus Young has said that they didn't record anything with AC/DC. That would have been killer. If they could have released something like even 1 or 2 songs, that would have been absolutely killer. Do I think there will be a new album? Oh, that's such a tough question. The optimist says yes. The realist would be very surprised. I think if they did, it would be a kind of surprise release. It would be kind of catch everyone a bit off guard. How I see it, I think it would be posthumous. As sad as that sounds, I think the next amount of stuff we'll see from Axl will probably be after he dies, and that'll be tragic, because going back to what you said before around kind of sort of missed opportunities or lost potential, this is a perfect example. I mean, how many people get excited for a Looney Tunes song, you know, as much as they did when Axl released that song there. So, yeah.
I feel like I would like to believe that we certainly don't know Axl at all. Like none of us are friends with him.
Absolutely, yeah.
None of us know his train of thought. But
of course,
as much as a fan can know Axl, I'd like to think that his creative side is still there. And so somewhere deep down inside, he wants to release something new. Like I was having this discussion with a friend who is a big Smashing Pumpkins fan. But he sort of lives in a small circle of friends where he is the sole Smashing Pumpkins fan. Other people really find Billy Corgan to be a little bit, well, not a little bit, annoying. And my friend and myself, we sort of look at Billy Corgan in a different light. That he is I think that he's an extremely talented artist and a very talented creator, and so I would think that people like Billy Corgan and like Axl Rose, they are inherently creators, and they want to create new stuff, whether they feel comfortable with releasing that to the general public, or if they believe that that sort of new material would be popular. Those are two almost mutually exclusive things to me, that or certainly separate, that you can be a creator and you can want to put that stuff out there, but at the same time, just because you want to put it out there doesn't necessarily mean that you believe that it's going to be popular. And I think that's what some creators, some artists do. They're happy to just throw whatever they're working on out there, regardless of whether it's popular. In fact, I just recently watched a documentary on Kate Bush, where her later work, her work was always different. Every time she pumped something out, it seemed to be very different from the previous album. There was a lot of work there that was not well received by previous fans, or fans of her previous albums. And she didn't care, she didn't create those songs for them, and so there's different. I feel like that there's different motivations for people to create this stuff. Some artists may do it because they want to make their fans happy. Others might do it to make themselves happy. And if they are just in it to make themselves happy, that can very well mean that they keep it to themselves. So. Yeah, I'm not too sure what category Axl fits into.
Well, that's it. I guess it kind of comes to a point of what, as you said, what's your motivation? But then also, what do you define as success? Is success, the number of albums you've sold, the number of streams you've made, the number of zeros in your bank account, or is it the impact you have on people? So, what's the motivation for Axl really? I think he felt, from what we see, quite burned as to how Chinese Democracy was released in kind of every way, in the sense of how it actually was released, with the book that had loads of errors, and then he sort of shunned the press, and then also I think he was kind of I don't think he expected the criticism that was coming back, and so at this point, is he probably thinking anything he puts out now is damaging his legacy? I would argue no, in the sense that going back to one of the shows I saw in 2010 was at Reading Festival, and it's I guess younger festivals these days, and Guns N' Roses going on. Axl Rose sounded incredible, and I was as a mega fan, I'm right up the front and absolutely loving it, but generally in the press and a lot of people around said it was rubbish, and I was like, if Slash and Duff were on this stage, they would have been hailing this as the show that stole the weekend. And so I think now, with Slash and Duff back in the band, having that story behind the material, if your motivation or what your definition of success is how many albums sell, it will sell. It will definitely sell, and people will like it. But again, what's Axl's motivation? I think looking at the last couple of years and seeing kind of on the face of it how little progress has been made, again I say on the face of it because we don't know, I would infer that there's still some creative differences there. If you listen to Slash's output, it's very Slash, which is, I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's very Slash. I've listened to obviously Duff's solo album and some of the Walking Paper stuff, and you think it's good. I don't know if Axl and Slash would see eye to eye, so Would I see that new album coming out anytime soon? Maybe not, unless a surprise release. I would also consider it, I imagine it would be songs that have already been written. I think the fact that we saw Hard School at the sound check means that, not that we know where the origins of that song come from, but if we consider that a new Guns N' Roses song, I think it'll be made up of leftovers from the previous, the sort of unreleased albums, which I would be delighted to hear. But also, on the same token, I'd actually feel a bit shortchanged if I didn't get to hear the ones with Robin Fink and Buckethead if they're removed. I was personally quite devastated when they took off Brian May from Catching the Rye, and I think to record over some of the stuff would be kind of tragic. But I really hope an album comes out, and I think it's very important. But having been a fan of this band for over half of my life and seen one album come out, I don't know. I would love to say yes, though. I'd love to say yes.
Nick, thank you so much.
No,
I hope this
you.
experience was somewhat less painful for you than pulling teeth. No, it's certainly not everybody's cup of tea to talk publicly, so to speak, but
I enjoyed it.
You've been very gracious with your time and your stories.
No, thank you for having me on.
And I'm very grateful. I hope we get to meet up at a show again sooner rather than later. And
yes, sir.
God willing, it'll include some new songs. Dare we dream?
Yeah, well, that's it. I think we have to. We have to live in hope, don't we? We have to.
Thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you, Rich.
Okay, Tim, what are your thoughts on London Night 1?
Let's face it, man. Another knockout design by Bueller, man. Again, not that all of his are, like the Imola one, but I don't know if it's something about GNR fans or hard rock / heavy metal fans that like some attraction to like macabre things, But of course, you have the Jack the Ripper reference going on, which is awesome, especially obviously for London. But what I really like about this one, or more than anything else, are two things: how they use like a red sky for nighttime, like in the back there, that's awesome.
Yes,
and those 4 little roses that are dropped in the foreground there, that's just what a cool addition, And it totally, to me, makes the design. And I know you'll be happy because it has that classic font on top.
It does. Look, I agree with everything you've just said. I think it's a gorgeous design and definitely one of my favorites. I think it was a very bold move to just have the Guns N' Roses logo so tiny in comparison to the size of the design. But it's just done so well. Like you said, the fallen roses, the way Arian has managed to make the cobblestones on the street sort of shimmer.
Yeah.
And like, again, you mentioned the red sky. I think that's killer. It definitely deserves to be as popular as it is.
Yeah. This one, not easy to find. And 2, it's going to cost you a penny if you do.
Yeah.
And, a little quick tangent about that, people have to understand that, I know that people, whoever bought it, spent only $50 for it at the concert, or 50 euros or whatever, pounds, whatever the hell it is these days over there. But, some things become collectible instantly. It's just the way it is. And, you can't do anything about the free market, either deal with it or don't bother collecting. I don't know what to tell you. I know it sucks. I've been on the other end of it many times, but this one might be $1,000 at least, right? I mean,
at least,
right.
Yeah. Oh, it's way more than
right.
that. Yeah, it's definitely very collectible, very expensive. The odd thing about it in terms of collecting it is that compared to some of the other like rare, expensive lithographs, especially from Europe, this is probably the one that is traded the most. Like out of all of the collectible high value ones, this one is the one that I see show up on eBay most frequently, the one that I see and hear get traded and sold in on private forums and in private transactions. It definitely gets around, like if you really, really want one, if you really want one of the rare ones, this is probably, as long as you've got the pockets for it, it's definitely probably the most likely attainable one out of all of the expensive ones.
That's what I think too. And to me, and I could say this about any concert, but especially this one, because I think this concert had 70,000 people at it.
Yeah.
So you think about that, and there's only 150 of them. The fact that I'm able to get my hands on one at all is mind-boggling, really.
Absolutely mind-boggling.
Right?
Yeah.
And but I'm glad I have. That's all I can say, I guess.
I think it's absolutely insulting, like intentionally or accidentally, absolutely insulting to have only 150 copies of this particular amazing design for a concert that only that had 75,000 people at it. I think it was either 100. I think it was 150,000 people over the two concerts.
Wow!
So
Wow!
75,000 people per concert, and Night 2 had a slightly larger print run, but for arguably the better of the two designs to be the lower volume of the two is almost criminal.
Were you trying to start a riot, or you know what I mean? Right?
Talking about it being a two-nighter, let's look at the second design for Night 2. What are your thoughts on Night 2?
Well, it's definitely one that's not as popular, although it's still a popular one. What I like about it are a couple of things. One, I like the classic building silhouettes that are in the background there, right? For London. What really strikes me about this one more than anything else is the hat. The way that he can use, I don't know if it's a color or just the way he did the strokes, but make it look fuzzy, even in like a painting. To me, that's phenomenal, and really good artistry, in my opinion. I like the two small little guns that are like the lapels of the collar there, it just, the buttons, I mean, it's simplistic, but yet awesome. I don't know, yeah.
I like this design a lot more than most other people, and I think it's criminally underrated. I think it's obviously overshadowed by how awesome Night 1 was, but I think there's some nuances that people simply glance over.
The yellow eyes, by the way? Yeah, I like that too.
Right. Well, I absolutely love the rose in the gun barrel, for one, and using a belt of bullets for the chin strap is an awesome idea as well. The way the red is sketched in, I don't know why, but I think it works really well. Like, the rest of it is fairly detailed and looks like a pretty deliberate illustration. However, the red is very crudely sketched in, and it works.
Yes.
It feels a little more punk, I suppose. It's hard to put into words, but I think it deserves a bit more love than it gets.
Like you said, it gets overshadowed, but it shouldn't. Yeah, because it's really impressive with what he did here for all the reasons that you said. Yep, totally.
Excellent. Well, let's move on. Yet another new country for the tour. We're moving on to Gdańsk in Poland. Now, this it's definitely one of my favorites and hits all the right notes for my tastes. That limited color palette, a very, very nice shade of blue. Again, the tiniest amount of yellow for the eyes. But for me, what I really love are the design elements for the embellished border. I think that, admittedly, it's a very dark litho, so it's not something that jumps out at you. But there's very detailed mermaids and a squid and an octopus in the border, and they're awesome. I love it. For me, I'm a bit of a pirate fan, so they remind me of old maritime engravings and stuff like Scrimshaw, the intricate engravings that whalers used to carve into whale bones and whale teeth and that sort of stuff. The only thing, like, this is me just, nitpicking, but the only thing I would have probably done differently is that I probably would have wanted to see it printed with blue foil.
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God.
I think there are very few, there's obviously very few gimmick lithos from the tour, such as glow in the dark or foil, and it should certainly remain that way. Absolutely. It should be used sparingly. But I think this is one of the few designs that instantly made me think how freaking amazing it might have been as a foil.
Man, I can't even get over thinking about that right now as we're talking. Like, yeah, that would be.
It would have been cool, right?
Oh
and
my God.
like it even to me, it works even more so for this particular theme because the statue that it's based off of is a metal statue. It's not a stone statue; it's a metal statue. So it would have worked well, I think.
Yeah, all the reasons you said. Yeah, this one is just. I can't even think for a word to describe it. This is definitely. I know we'll do the awards later, but this is definitely my favorite one. I can tell you that right now. I'm a huge fan of that shade of blue. You have no idea, and a lot of things, not just in this particular piece here. again, like the yellow eyes, right? And really, that's what you have: yellow, blue, and then black and gray, and that's it. And it's just amazing. The flourishes at the top left and top right, like you said, the octopus and the squid, and then the GNR logo and how it's like a compass as well. Like, man, like this one. I don't know how to describe it with the right words to say what I feel about it. It's just phenomenal, and I don't know why, but man, this shirt is like almost impossible to find. And when it does come out, it goes for hundreds of dollars. But anyway, if you have one and you want to sell it, look me up, because I definitely need it.
It's interesting that you mentioned both the shirt and the compass, because that was one thing that I remember is that I was fortunate enough to grab a shirt, and the shirt has got the compass on it. It's that embellishment on the back. I'm pretty sure, unless my memory might be failing me, but I'm pretty sure that the embellishment on the back of the shirt involves the compass, which I think is very, very cool.
Man, and I had a chance to get one at a decent price, but it was on eBay, and just like we were talking about before, I thought it was sketchy. I won't get into why, because I don't think we want to talk about this particular seller right now, but I regretted that a lot. Yeah, but oh well. Anyway.
Yeah, sometimes you just can't. Like you'd really like to know the reason why one particular thing is more expensive than the rest, and sometimes there's just no answer, right?
I think what it has to do with, in the case of the shirt at least, I think everyone feels very similar to us, that they think this is a killer design, and maybe they want the world to see it, so they want to be able to wear it every day. The lithograph, you can't just carry it around with you everywhere you go and show people it, right?
That's true. No, that's true. Well, I've said it multiple times in conversations with my friends that like collecting shirts would probably have been a smarter, easier move than collecting lithographs. For a multitude of reasons, and one of them is it's an item with the art on it that you are able to showcase to more people.
Right.
If you've got a lithograph, you're only ever really going to be able to show it to people that come visit you.
Yep.
Right. Whereas a shirt, you wear it, you wear it out, and other people get to see it, and so it's it's a little bit easier to showcase the art and allow other people to appreciate it, and combine that with the fact that it's a hell of a lot easier to take care of a shirt at a rock concert, and that they clearly make hundreds, if not thousands, more of them than they do the lithographs. Yeah, it's probably, in hindsight, it might have been the easier thing to collect.
Although, and we'll talk about this, I think for the last show that we do here. But for some shows, there weren't shirts, and so I don't know why. But
that's true.
Anyway,
yeah.
But this one there is. It's just very extremely rare. Yeah. Oh well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, I'm glad you love it as much as I do.
Oh, man.
All right, let's move on to the next design. As previously mentioned, we're heading back to Germany. So this is one of the multiple concerts that they had in Germany. Many of the other European countries, let alone the rest of the countries of the world, were not so fortunate to be able to get multiple concerts, but Germany did, and this is one of them. Hannover. Look, Tim, this one is stunning as far as I'm concerned. I think the colors are what win me over. I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to mention, so I'll keep some of the specifics vague, but I was fortunate enough to actually get to see one of the non-approved designs for Hannover that was submitted by another artist.
Oh.
And not only the theme, but the composition was almost exactly the same. The colors were different, but the theme was pretty much identical. Well, not pretty much. The theme was identical, and the layout, the composition was almost identical. So I'm guessing that the theme is probably not particularly novel, which makes me wonder whether, Hanover locals might think that it's a bit cliched. But to me, as a interested third party, the combination of off-white and orange looks really tasteful. I think it works very well. And in terms of scarcity, This was another concert where weather played a very significant role in determining how difficult it is to get your hands on this litho. It rained so hard at that concert that the concert had to be stopped mid-show, so you can imagine that a lot of people probably decided against buying a litho from Hannover because, unless you had prepared beforehand, there would have been little chance of you being able to get the litho home undamaged.
This one, there's a lot going on, like, that you don't really see right after when you initially look at it. Like, even in the background, there's like light gray and dark grays, and it's. But what I like about this one more than anything else, the yellow and the orange and the grays and like the, I don't know, off-white, whatever you want to call it, is very muted, right? And to me, what's awesome about that is it makes the red on the lips, and which is very hard to notice, by the way, but her lips are red, and the red on the roses just pop so much more, and I think that's just amazing. That's stunning, really,
Yeah.
And it was cool, like, a lot of times when artists do a lithograph for Guns N' Roses that has a person in it, they usually make the person have, like, the skeleton kind of look or whatever. But in this case, he went with the animal instead of the person, and I think that's a nice change of pace. But yeah, I agree with you. This one is another high-quality one. I'm glad I was able to get it when I was able to get it, but yeah, because right now it's not even about the price you want to pay. It's just whether you can even find one that someone wants to sell, right?
Yeah, they are really hard to find, and they have been since day one, essentially.
Yeah.
And the price sort of reflects that. It's a very classy design, and it's very hard to get. Add those two things together, you get an expensive litho.
Man,
okay,
great design.
So again, we visited Germany again, and now we're leaving again. We move on to yet another country, a new country. We are in Belgium. We are at Werchter. Look, it's Europe, so I guess it comes as no surprise that it's another art reference, which also means that it comes as no surprise that I love the hell out of it. I don't know. I might have chosen a different Magritte painting to reference, but this works really well. I keep wondering if there might have been a better way to compose the design so as it didn't have such a large amount of white border.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not sure, I mean, that might be wishful thinking. Nevertheless, it's another classy reference and another design where Arian Buehler has managed to sort of bring out that canvas effect in the design and, to provide the illusion that it's a real painting on real canvas. So look, Magritte, the canvas effect, it's a winner in my book.
To do that must be so hard, right? So I appreciate any artist taking the time to add a little effect like that. And then just everything else, it just has one, it's a well-known painting, so I think everyone gets the reference right off the bat. And then two, it just checks it has all the check marks that you want to see, right? I mean, okay, you got the gun, you got the rose, you got the skeleton, you got the top hat instead of the regular hat that he could have used, right? Leather jacket for GNR fans or sometimes the GNR members themselves, the different GNR pins. Then you got the flag of the country, so you have that reference as well going on. I mean, yeah, just what more could you ask for, really?
I think it's also, come to think of it, it's one of the handful of designs that not only does it not show up on eBay very often, but I think it's been a few years since I've even seen anyone have one for sale or trade.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think we all focus on some of the more popular designs a little too much, that we forget that there's a lot of other designs from the same period of the tour that you just never see, I'm really hoping that there's not too many people out there that are still searching for one, because they can be really, really, really hard to find.
Oh, yes. Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Okay. So let's say goodbye to Belgium, at least for this leg. I know that they do head back to Belgium for Europe 2018, but we say goodbye at the moment, and we head to yet another new country for the Not in This Lifetime tour. We're heading to Denmark. We're heading to Copenhagen. This one, I think, is very underrated. However, at the same time, I can understand why perhaps it might not be too popular. I look at it from the perspective of maybe being a resident of Copenhagen, maybe the residents of Copenhagen are bored to death of The Little Mermaid being used as a theme for every damn concert of every damn artist that comes to play in their city. So, yeah, look, the theme is definitely very predictable, but setting that aside, I think it's just amazing. Using the red contrast color for, just for the heart and for the roses is perfect in my book. I think that the colors, the red really, really pops, and the way it looks like a charcoal sketch, or maybe even an inverse charcoal sketch, so to speak. It looks beautiful to me. It's just a shame that it's probably the only theme that anyone ever seems to use for Copenhagen.
It kind of, the fact that you're mentioning that kind of makes me think about some of the New York lithographs that they've had and why they didn't use some of the more famous landmarks,
right.
in that particular city. And maybe it was for this reason right here, because they didn't want to make it so obvious, maybe that's part of that. Maybe they listened to some of the feedback that maybe people have had about the designs over the years. But yeah, this one, like everything that you said, I mean, again, the artistry here, when you can use only so many colors and yet still put so much detail in, that to me is impressive. What can I tell you? And I know for people who are artists, maybe it's like no big thing, but to me, I think it's just, amazing. What can I say? But yeah, and it's funny because we're talking about this one and like the last 2 or 3 designs that we talked about. I don't understand why those aren't as rare or desirable as the Munich one or the Bilbao one. Or I mean, I don't get it. I still can't figure out why it's those 4 in the beginning. Like,
I don't know. I guess they can't all be superstars, like you've got to have some that fly under the radar, and I think this is one of them.
Too.
Okay. What have we got next?
Stockholm. Hell yes. Again, I'm kind of, I know a lot of people aren't on the same page as me, but I like ones that are different. And to me, this one very much is. You could argue it's similar in that, like, okay, it's using a stylized, background, kind of like the Slane one, and, what's so different about that. But to me, it's the colors that are used that are different here. Pretty, like you said, kind of another, if I can say, bright one, which is unusual for GNR. Usually they're darker in their color scheme and everything.
Right. And,
of course, the reference, which thanks to you and your website, I now know what it is. And also the reference in that if you look at the teeth of the skull, if it says it tastes good, don't it? One, that's a very obscure GNR song to even reference here. And I didn't think about this, but as you pointed out to me the other day, who knows? I mean, I've never talked to this artist. I could be wrong here, but I think I agree with you that I think the reference is to, like in 2006, Axl, was in Stockholm, I'm guessing for a concert or something. And there was an incident at a hotel. He was drunk, and this apparently was like at 8 a.m. in the morning. So after partying all night, obviously, getting into an argument with some woman in the hotel lobby. I don't know who the woman is or what the argument was about for that matter, but apparently, not that Axl got in a fight with the woman. The fight with the woman was a verbal fight, but then like a security guard, I think he got into a scuffle with, and either allegedly or maybe it actually happened. I'm going to say allegedly, bit a security guard in the leg. So from that point of view, it tastes good, don't it? Makes a little sense then, right? Because it bit a leg, and so therefore, again, is it that? I don't know. It could be something else for all the hell I know. But I think that's what it's referencing. I think it's fucking great.
Yeah, look, I agree with you that using, seeing as there's so many dark, predominantly black designs, especially for Europe 2017, seeing such a novel approach, seeing comparatively bright colors, is a welcome change. Absolutely. And to me, I don't know whether it's intentional or not, but, the design actually looks a little something like you'd see on the back of a deck of playing cards. It kind of has that feel to it, if that makes any sense. And I know some people are divided on the use of lyrics on some of the lithograph designs. that's something that the artist Ulrich Planner has worked into a lot of his designs. If you see a design with a snippet of lyrics on it, it's almost certainly an Uli design. I think it works when the right lyrics are chosen, and at least it has, or it at least has the potential of working if the right lyrics are chosen. And I think with your explanation about the incident with Axel, I think it works well. At the same time, if it didn't have the lyrics, I think it would work just as well. So, either way, it would have been fine. I think in this particular situation, it's a cool addition, and it's done well. It's not just lyrics thrown at the bottom of the design or anything. It's actually implemented into the design like that. I think it looks pretty cool.
And I don't know if it's because of the band Guns N' Roses and their theme of usually having a gun or a rose, because there's no gun on this lithograph, but there is presumably a bullet hole in the skull. I'm guessing that's what that is. Now I don't know that king that this is based on. I don't know if there was guns when that guy was alive, or if he got shot if there were guns when he was alive, or if it's just because of, again, he wants to tie guns somehow into this. But it is kind of weird right there.
Good question.
And what's cool is that this shirt is actually a very interesting GNR shirt. One, the color of the shirt is like dark blue. So that's a very rare color for them to use for a shirt.
Yes.
Two, there's nothing on the back. It's just the front. And it's basically just everything that you see in yellow here. There's really the other part of the design, it's there, but it's very faded. So it's kind of a pretty cool shirt, actually, if you can find it.
Okay.
Pretty neat. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Very, very cool. So from Stockholm, we go to... Okay. Now, I know Finnish is one of the most difficult languages to learn, so I apologize for any Finnish speakers out there, but I'm doing my best. I believe it's pronounced Hämeenlinna. From now on, to save ourselves embarrassment, I'm simply just going to refer to it as Finland.
Sounds good. Yeah.
The Aurora design. I think this design is gorgeous, but I feel like it could have been executed a little better. I say that, having not a single artistic bone in my body, being a self-confessed non-artistic person, I feel like the Aurora is a great theme for the poster, but the way GNR is written in the sky kind of feels a little clunky, and I feel like the border doesn't quite fit. Like it feels like it's almost there simply to fill up space. That said, it's still very beautiful. I think the skull and the rose part of the Aurora is perfect. I just would have liked to have seen the rest of it done in, I don't know, some different way, perhaps. What that different way is, I'm not quite sure, but that's probably the job of a critic is to criticize and not suggest, right? So, but to me, more importantly, this concert is where print volumes hit their all-time low.
Yeah.
The numbers had been going down the entire Europe 2017 leg, to the point where it felt like it was deliberate. It felt like it was that they were being malicious about it. Slane started at 400 lithographs, then it slowly went down to 350s and 250s, then 150s and hundreds. There's quite a number of concerts on the Europe 2017 leg where there's only 100 lithographs available. But then for this concert, and in fact the subsequent concert as well, they'd suddenly drop it to 80. I don't know. It just it felt like such a kick in the nuts as a collector, and especially considering that these were not arena shows. These were not small venues. These were huge stadiums or huge venues with capacity for 50, 60, 70,000 plus people. To only have 80 prints available is just, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
I mean, when you think about it, you could get online at the merch stand, and depending on how many people are in front of you and want that lithograph, you could get online, let's say an hour after the line started, which is still pretty early to get online, and still not get one of these. You know what I mean? Which is crazy when you think about that. And it just goes to show, like, it gets really stressful as a fan who wants one of these things when you're at a show, that, like, to know that your only chance of getting one. I mean, no offense to any ignorant people out there, but at this point, we all know you're not going to get one if you wait till after the show. I'm sorry. Maybe not ever, but extremely rare you're going to get a lithograph after the show. But the fact that even before the show, that nowadays you have to tell yourself, I have to be the first goddamn person in line, otherwise I don't have a chance. I mean, like, that's unfortunate. But, and I don't know. You know, you might know more than me, because I know you talk to some of these artists and sometimes to the company that's behind GNR merchandise. Like, did something happen? There's a reason why there was only 80, or was it just like a very weird decision? I don't know.
I've brought up the question. I've asked the question a couple of times, and I apologize for being very vague here, but I get the feeling that whatever the answer was that I got was vague enough that, like, it didn't register to me. Like, I still don't know exactly who it is that specifies how many are going to be printed. Like, I'm certain I've asked the question, but I don't remember what the answer was. So I'm thinking that whatever the answer I was given was not definitive. Like, I'm thinking that more than one person involved, and it could differ. Like, there could be several people that could choose how many are printed. I'm trying to rack my brain, but I'm thinking that even the printer themselves, like the print company that's involved, might have some say in how many are printed.
Oh, yeah.
But still, that doesn't answer the question why this concert in particular, they decided to drop it to 80. I don't really know. It's I
mean, I can understand.
It remains a mystery.
If, like, for example, let's say one of the shows when you had like 350, like in the beginning, right? And if at the end of the night there was like 200 that still didn't sell, okay, I get it then going forward, right? But I don't think that's the case in any of these concerts. So
yeah, I don't think it's the case either. I think that there's other factors involved, or it's just completely arbitrary. And I'm feeling that maybe it's just completely arbitrary.
Yeah, like, I can picture them calling up, like, someone who works for GNR. How many do you want made? And they just use, like, a random number generator on their phone. Like, all right, 80.
Not only that, I feel like there's every chance that they call up GNR and say, how many should we print? And the guy that answers the phone rolls the dice and goes 80. And then they hang up the phone. And the print company is like, all right, let's print 150. Yeah. You know, like, that just doesn't make any sense. Or the exact opposite. They call up GNR, and GNR says, "Oh, print 300," and they hang up the phone and go, "Okay, boys, let's spin up the printer and let's print 200." Right. You know, like, right. I don't think that there's any sense to it at all. I think that maybe they just, whoever decides on that day how many to print, just decides on a whim how many to print for that day. So who knows? I might, maybe it's worthwhile asking again, and I'll pay more attention and maybe try to eke out more detail. But either way, this is, you know, it can only affect things going forward. It's not going to affect how difficult it was to get your hands on one of these lithographs back in 2017. Right. Excellent. Yeah. All right. And this was, like I mentioned, this was not the only this was not the only lithograph for this particular concert. This concert, even though the print volumes were very low, there was admittedly 2 designs for Finland. So if we look at the next design, it is the second design for Finland, the Castle. You know, I like how chaotic this design looks. It reminds me of some horror movies, like maybe Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2, where the trees are malevolent and, you know, come to life. My only gripe is one that you've heard 100 times before. I think it would have looked better with, you know, the Guns N' Roses font, but that's pretty much it. Everything else about it, I think, looks pretty cool.
Well, for me, Okay, so you obviously, on your website, you have a picture of what the reference is for that castle. Not only in this lithograph, but the last one, same castle, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking at that castle, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of trees around. So I don't understand, right? The trees in this particular lithograph. And then secondly, I don't know, is the castle haunted or the woods around it haunted or something? They're wrong. Again, maybe it's that Guns N' Roses or hard rock fan that most of us have some sort of affinity with the macabre, right? So you're going to have kind of like a, I hate to use the word evil, but evil kind of design built into it. But I don't know. Is there something about that area that is haunted, or I don't know?
I'm not quite sure, but I do know that you can see the moon in the design. Yeah. That was a specific intentional reference to the fact that this concert was held on the summer solstice.
Oh.
So that there was a deliberate sort of intention. It was deliberate to add the moon there. Whether there's some sort of connection with, the summer solstice and, I don't know, pagan rituals or something, evil or, spirits and that sort of stuff. I'm not quite sure, but
maybe.
Maybe, I'm certainly not full bottle on Finnish mythology and things of that nature, but I'm guessing maybe. Yeah.
And what's interesting about this lithograph, it doesn't reference any of the three big things. There's no guns, there's no roses, and there's no Not in This Lifetime anywhere either. So it's kind of rare to have neither of those three things in it, actually.
And technically speaking, apart from the name of the band, there's no English on the poster either.
Right, yeah, true. Yeah. Man.
Okay, well, that was Finland. Let's move on to yet again another new country for the Not in This Lifetime tour. We are moving on to the Czech Republic. We are in Prague, and we are looking at one of two designs for Prague. First one, we shall look at Bone Church, the Prague Bone Church design. I'm quite a big fan of this because I think reworking the shield design to incorporate the guns and the roses must have been an absolute ball ache to do. And for it to look as good as it, especially for it to look as good as it does, I wouldn't even know where to begin, but Uli did a really good job in replicating it. So I think it's gorgeous. I think it makes it for a good shirt too. It's again one of those designs that I don't hear too many people searching for. So,
well, my first impressions of it are exactly what you said. To do the roses and the guns must have taken a while, and so again, the time it takes to do that and the artistry, I can really appreciate that. But yeah, a total great reference, and of course they're going to do this for GNR because GNR, you have the whole skull thing, from Appetite for Destruction and all that. So of course this was going to be the one, but done very well. And the background, at first when I saw this, I was like, what the hell? But now that I see the picture of the real thing in the background, I understand what the background is. It's just a very broad, skull stacked in the background is what that's supposed to be, right? And so, yeah, I think it's done really well. But you're right, though. This is just a great, not just this one, but the Finland ones and this one and the other Prague one are great examples of where scarcity doesn't always equal value, right? Because you think there's only 80 of these. These should be the most valuable lithographs so far that GNR's done, right? But they're not, right? And
they're certainly not cheap, but they're nowhere near close to being the hardest to find or the most expensive to purchase.
Absolutely, man.
And I think brown, also considering how distinctly brown the design is, that's not a very common color for a poster design. So that to me makes it certainly makes it unique.
Right.
Okay. It was not the only design for Prague, and it was also not the only design limited to 80 copies. The second design for Prague is what I have referred to as the propaganda poster. I'm a big fan of this design simply because of the reference to the iconic composition by Rodchenko. I don't know why exactly, but that Rodchenko design really stood out to me, and I've seen it replicated so many times over the years. In fact, I think I saw a beer can or an energy drink can that used the same composition for their logo. And it's, I've seen that sort of layout multiple times used in advertising. It's iconic to me, at least. So, to see it repurposed for a Guns N' Roses lithograph is awesome. The only thing I worry about maybe is the Soviet imagery. That could be a very sensitive part of Czech history. So, it might, I don't know whether, it might not sit well for some people, but at least from, a third-party perspective on the outside looking in, I think it looks amazing. In a way, it kind of, maybe just because of the colors, it kind of evokes a little bit of Chinese democracy era Guns N' Roses for me.
Right. That's one of the coolest things I think about this one, is that a lot of times when people make lithographs, whether for this band or for other bands, it's usually going to be, well, either A, have nothing to do with anything, or B, if it does have to do with anything, it's going to be like either a landmark or maybe a famous piece of art, right? And not that this artist, this Russian artist's posters aren't artwork or famous or anything, but they're not as famous as these other paintings are and stuff, right? But to me, this one more references the history of like the region, and I think that's cool. Even though, like you said, it can be a sensitive topic, and I understand that, and not even just a topic, but even the way the letters are like backwards and stuff, right? That might throw a lot of people off, but I don't know. I'm not trying to make light of anyone's feelings or experiences with the past during that era and everything. But I also think we have to recognize the past, and I think it works in this particular case. In my opinion, which is coming from someone who's never had to deal with this, I don't think it's offensive. But if people take it that way, I can't blame them, I guess, right? But I haven't really talked to any fans, I don't think, that I know of from this area of the world. So I'd be curious about their take on this. And of course, older fans might have a different opinion than younger fans, right? But
that's exactly right. Yeah, they would have been. I'm guessing that clearly older fans are more likely to have experienced it firsthand. And I agree with you that I certainly haven't heard any negative takes on the design. However, I know that it can be a sensitive subject.
Right.
But on a lighter note, what are your thoughts about the landscape aspect as opposed to being portrait?
Well, I really like that. I forgot I was going to mention that. Thank you for reminding me. Because again, just something different, which I think is really cool. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe the only other ones were the Japan Tokyo ones, right?
I think so. Yeah.
And so at least so far, I can't remember going forward or not. But at this point in the time in the tour, so I think that's great, actually.
Well, I think at least we're done there with the rock bottom print volume concerts. Luckily, Prague and Finland were the only two concerts where they decided that 80 was an appropriate print volume number. For the next concert, we moved to Paris, where they were so very, very generous to print a massive 100 copies.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I know most of my friends are going to disagree with me, but I'm simply not a big fan of Paris. It looks cool, but the reference to me doesn't feel very Paris. I don't know whether it's a byproduct of making it a glow in the dark print, but the colors are also quite dull in real life, as far as I'm concerned. And, it just doesn't scream to me as being a good choice for a Guns N' Roses poster. That's not to say that it's not beautiful. It just doesn't seem to be what I would be looking for in a Guns N' Roses design.
Yeah, what I don't understand, like what they're standing on, right? I mean, because to me, if I had to guess, I'm assuming the background is supposed to be like stars in space or something, and so maybe what they're standing on is supposed to be like a chunk of the moon or something, or some kind of planet or some kind of moon. But why is it just like a chunk of it? Why not like the? I mean, I don't know what he was going for there.
I'm not quite sure either.
But I'll admit, because I only got this one. I say recently. It wasn't like it was last week, but relatively recently. I haven't really. Have you tried out the glow in the dark feature? And what exactly glows in the dark on this one?
Yeah, look, I'm pretty sure that it's the red parts.
Oh wow!
And the stars. I don't have it framed. I'm not a huge fan of the design, so I haven't looked at it for a while, and I certainly haven't spent too much time looking at it in the dark. But I'm pretty sure that those are the glow in the dark sections. I'm also, like I mentioned, that I feel like the glow in the dark aspect slightly compromised the coloring, because if you look at the shirt for Paris, the Guns N' Roses script on the shirt is not a bright red, but at least a stronger shade of red.
Yeah, it is.
Whereas with the poster, it's very, very faded. And, it's, I don't know, I feel like maybe because of the stars, it makes for a good choice for a glow-in-the-dark print, but I don't know. It makes me wonder if there were any other designs that would have been a more appropriate candidate for glow-in-the-dark than Paris. Yeah, I don't know. Now, come to think of it, here's a question for you. Is there a non-glow-in-the-dark print from the Guns N' Roses Not in This Lifetime tour that you would have liked to have seen be glow-in-the-dark?
How should I phrase this? I'm not sure if I would necessarily like to or not, but to me, this design, what the colors and everything in this design remind me of? It reminds me of the Hannover one with the horse, right? And that one might have been cool glow in the dark, like with the horse's skeleton part glow in the dark, kind of like how that Thailand one, like the skeleton of the elephant's supposed to glow, right? But
that's a good choice. Yeah,
it might have been cool. I think the other one that I think about a lot, the purple surfer from Brisbane. That one would have been pretty badass glow in the dark too, I think.
That's perfect for it, just because I think the colors would have worked. You could have had two different colored glow in the dark on that poster.
Right? Almost like a black light kind of thing going on or something, right?
That one definitely is a good choice. I would have loved to have seen that as glow in the dark. Additionally, I think that if seeing this Paris and having the stars glow in the dark makes me think, imagine if Cincinnati's stars glowed in the dark.
Oh, damn, yeah.
Glowed in the dark, sorry. That would have been awesome to see them. That would have made Cincinnati just amazing. Even if nothing else glowed in the dark, if just simply the stars glowed in the dark on Cincinnati, I think that would have been a tasteful addition.
It definitely would have upped the value and rarity of that one, which is already valuable, right? Yeah. No, that would have been really great, actually. Yes. That would have been pretty epic, yeah.
What about foil? I know that's another gimmick that sometimes gets trotted out for concert posters. Is there a design that you can think of that maybe you would prefer to have seen as a foil design?
Well, like you said, definitely the Gdańsk one. I think that's a great suggestion. I think that one would have been really cool as that. Another one that I think would have been cool with that would be the next one that we're going to talk about, actually, because the fact that it's supposed to be a stained glass window, foil might have made it really look pretty interesting, actually.
Yeah, okay.
Let's see. And sometimes it's just like little things in the lithograph that pop. For example, that Perth one, right? It's not like the entire thing's foil. It's just like those certain red parts of it, and I think it works really well. So it'd be harder for me to think of smaller things like that. I don't know. What do you think? Any ones that come to mind?
For me, there's two things. Before we move on to the foil, I just wanted to also mention that I think as far as glow in the dark is concerned, I would have loved to have seen Philadelphia 2016 glow in the dark as well. You've got Ben Franklin how cool would it be to see his
damn.
skeleton light up?
Yes.
Because that thematically would have worked pretty well to see him get lit up by the lightning. That would be very, very cool.
Shit.
But for me, in terms of foil, yeah, it's tough. It for me, I think that you look at some designs and for foil to work well, like you can go overkill and just make the whole thing foil. And I've seen a lot of other bands just do foil variants of their designs, but I would want it to be a little bit more conservative than that. Like just, you look at that Perth design where it's just certain select portions of it that are done in red. I think the Melbourne Tiger would have looked really cool if only the red roses were in red foil. I think that would have been pretty cool to see.
Oh, nice.
Additionally, just because I'm a big fan of the colors, something like maybe Minneapolis having purple foil for Minneapolis.
Oh, yeah.
Or pink foil for Winston-Salem. Winston-Salem's not an amazing design. It's certainly quirky. It would have looked great to have the hot pink sections of Winston-Salem to have that as pink foil. That would have worked pretty well as well, I think.
Yeah, and you know what I'm thinking about, which I shouldn't even suggest because I don't even have the regular one, but Orlando United, but just the heart part, like the colors that are in the heart, like the rainbow colors in the heart.
That would be gorgeous too. Yeah. Look, I think that there's quite a few designs that would benefit from having some sort of gimmick. However, I don't want them to go overboard with it. So maybe we should be keeping our mouth shut that we don't start to pollute the mind of the powers that be and start to give them bad ideas. But yeah, look, I think that there are a handful of designs that would look really, really cool with a little bit of foil or a little bit of glow in the dark. But in terms of the volume, the percentage of these designs that end up with these types of embellishments, I think is proportionally speaking, a good amount. I wouldn't want them to come out more frequently. I think having them as very rare, special versions is a good thing.
It's funny you mentioned that because I don't know why, but the other day I was wasting time just looking at Metallica lithographs online. And yeah, it seems like almost every one of theirs. First of all, I'm not sure if every concert does this, but the concert that I went to in Seattle for them, there was like a lithograph that the regular public can buy. Then there was a lithograph that only the VIP people could buy. So first of all, there's two lithographs for the show, which they're around for some GNR shows there is as well. But and not only that, but then there's at least like 3 variants of each, and it's like, holy shit, that would bankrupt me more than GNR bankrupts me, right?
What Metallica and I think Pearl Jam do frequently, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I got the impression from some Metallica and Pearl Jam collector fans that I know that sometimes there'll be a version or two that are available for purchase at the concert, and then the artist will print out variants themselves that are available for purchase off of their website.
Yep.
And so, you could end up with 4 different versions of the same design, 1 or 2 of them available at the concert, and 2 or 3 that you have to purchase if you want them from the artist himself or herself. And if you're a completionist, then you're going to go broke trying to get them all.
I kind of wonder if, in the case of like Metallica, although again, not that they're the only band to do this, but if they allow the artists to make their own, variants and artist proofs and all that crap, and in order to give them a chance to make some more money on their end, although GNR, like, what was it? The artist that did the Toronto one with like the skull and the snake or whatever, I think he did some artist proof ones too of some things that he did. I don't know if he had permission or not to do it, but he did them. But they were just the same as the regular lithograph. They were just AP on the bottom of them, right? But And then sometimes I'll see this, like it'll be the artist doing like a variant of the lithograph, in terms of like the color or like the foil or something like that. But then it won't have any other writing on it, so it won't say like, Guns N' Roses, Vienna, Austria. That'll be gone, and it'll just be like the design in the background, and that'll be it. So maybe they do that to like, so completists can feel a bit better. Like I don't need that one because it doesn't have the actual, writing on it. I don't know.
I heard, and I could be wrong here, but I heard that the setup that bands like Pearl Jam have is that the artist doesn't get paid for their artwork. Essentially the reason why they have artist prints and variants is because that's part of the deal. That the artists get the recognition, the exposure by being chosen as the artist for a Pearl Jam poster. But they don't get paid by Pearl Jam. They make their money by selling their own variants or their own artists' prints themselves, which, I don't know how the artists feel about that. I'm assuming that, maybe the exposure that you would get from being chosen as a Pearl Jam poster artist might pay for itself, and that's better than getting paid by paid cash by the band. But that is a setup that I've heard that some artists do, not just Pearl Jam, but some others. But that I don't believe, that's not what I'm told is the way that is not the way that Guns N' Roses do it, or at least that's what I've been told, that the artists for Guns N' Roses lithographs get paid, and because it's essentially a simple commission, that that's the reason why they don't bother to do their own. Generally speaking, they usually don't do their own artist prints and that sort of stuff. Of course, there's stuff like you mentioned, the first one that comes to mind is Sarah Ray. She did those extra variants of her San Diego design, but I know that Jimbo Phillips also sold AP's artist prints from his website for his Sacramento.
That's right, that guy. Yeah, yep.
So a handful of them clearly do it. I'm assuming that they do it with permission, but I would prefer that because I'm not a fan of variants. I think that yes, there are some designs that end up with very, very cool looking variants, but generally speaking, I don't want Guns N' Roses or any other band that I sort of collect to go down that path, because it just gets prohibitively expensive very quickly.
So yeah, oh well.
Okay, well, let's carry on. We've got a few more to go, and we're almost done. Let's have a quick look at Vienna, Austria. We just mentioned briefly the stained glass design for this. Yeah, what are your thoughts on this design?
One, I'm a huge fan of stained glass, so I love it. I really like the way they did Izzy and Slash's hair with the purple and black. Instead, they could have just done all black, right? But they made it look unique like that, I think. What can I say? I mean, it's simplistic. It's just a cross logo, right? And roses and stuff. But sometimes simplistic, it nails it, right? This one is amazing in my opinion. Another rare one where the shirt is actually like dark blue and not black. So if you can find it, you might be a fan of it. So yeah, I'm just, I'm over the moon for this one personally.
I really like it a lot too. I'm usually not a huge fan of overusing the Appetite for Destruction cross. It's iconic, yes, but it's also only a very small aspect of GNR, even more so now that two of the members depicted haven't been part of the band for so long. So I'd rather not see it be such a prominent aspect of GNR merchandise, but I understand. If it sells, I can't blame them for using it. Nevertheless, regarding the litho, I think that the colors are great. I think purple is a great color to use, especially if it's used as maybe like a contrast color. I mentioned earlier that I liked the purple for Minnesota. It's cool to see that from time to time in some of these designs. And of course, having, like you said, having a stained glass window design is brilliant. I think it looks awesome. I just don't know why the design ended up being arbitrarily slightly narrower than all of the other designs. It's the same height as the rest of the Europe prints. However, it's just that slightly bit narrower. I think it's like 1 or 2 inches narrower than all of the other Europe designs for no apparent reason.
That is weird.
Not too sure why, but that's the way it goes. And yeah, it's...
Did this artist do any other designs ever for GNR, or just this one?
No, he only did one.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a shame. I think it looks good, and clearly, very, very talented artist. It would have been nice to see him do more designs.
I gotta say, if I ever win the lottery, buy another house or build a house or whatever, I would definitely have this as a stained glass window in that house.
That would be awesome, wouldn't it? That would be so cool.
Oh man, Oh.
Well, that's Austria done and dusted. Let's move on to the Netherlands. Yet another place name that I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of, but I believe it's somewhere along the lines of Nijmegen. Yeah, I'm sure that there's some Dutch fans out there cringing. I apologize wholeheartedly, but yes, this is... Where do I start? Look, it's quite underwhelming to me, which is a real shame because the colors are amazing. Very high contrast, bright yellows and oranges. That part of it is beautiful. Classic GNR font. It feels like it had so much potential, but I feel like there's something missing, I feel like it's one session away from being completed. I feel like you add one more element, one extra thing, and it could be kick-ass. But as it is, it feels like it's falling just that little bit short.
Exactly, right? Like the colors are great because, again, a lot of the GNR designs for a lot of things are darker and stuff. So this one, it's nice that it's bright. But there are a couple of things I don't like about it, and one of them is, don't get me wrong. When I criticize things from a real life physics point of view, I'm able to suspend disbelief, like when I watch movies or TV or even for stuff like this. But if you're gonna have a real background in the back, like he does with the trees and bushes and shit, then how can you have giant guns and and these giant roses? I get it and I understand the reference. And by the way, I think your website is hilarious about the reference part where you're just reference Dutch. It's just it's kind of like the word, you can just put the word duh there instead.
I felt like there wasn't anything else I could describe there. Like clearly that's the reference. What else is there to say? Might as well just move on,
and it's kind of weird, by the way, how one rose has a lot of red in it, and the other one has just a slight bit. I mean, it has a little bit on the bottom of the one on top there, but you're right. Like it, almost like maybe the artist wasn't done in time when it came time. Like, hey, we gotta go, we gotta print this. Maybe that's what happened. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But look, it's still. It's not a bad design. I just think that it would have benefited from a little bit more embellishment.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, well we've finally made it to the end. We're looking now at the last design for the Europe 2017 leg. Funnily enough, a country that is not in Europe.
Right.
It's Tel Aviv, Israel. I mean, just before we look at the design, I kind of want to point out that it's pretty cool for Guns N' Roses to hit up Tel Aviv. I think it's, I don't know. I think it's cool for them to have tacked that on to the Europe leg. I think what I said for the previous Litho probably goes the same for this one. I think that the colors are, again, absolutely beautiful, and there's potential for a good theme. But again, it almost feels unfinished. Again, if you added just one more element, whatever that element might be, I think it would have gone from good to great.
For me, Yeah, it's kind of weird that the data's wrong. Like, I don't know if things got changed and they had to change the date of the show.
I thought that it might have been a typo because, clearly you've got 2017 there.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm thinking that maybe it was just 17 there. They were thinking of 2017 and they didn't get it changed in time, which is funny because on, I think it was the Guns N' Roses Instagram account, they posted the wrong design, deleted it, and posted the right design. But the design that got printed was obviously the wrong design. So again, if you look on Instagram, I'm pretty sure that the Instagram picture that got uploaded is the correct date.
Oh, weird.
However, whoever was in charge of getting the design to the printer accidentally sent the wrong version.
I mean, for me, I love this one because I am a huge fan, a very huge fan of mosaics, right? Not just mosaics in general, but that art form as well. Like I you have no idea, right? You know what I mean? And
well, you just surprised me now saying that. So yeah. I've definitely had no idea.
It's also very interesting. The first lithograph since London to mention not in this lifetime. None of the other ones did.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty strange, right?
I think some people were a little bit surprised with the end of the end of 2019 leg. A lot of people were surprised that not in this lifetime was not mentioned for nearly all of those lithographs except for the last one.
That's right.
And so people thought that was strange. And then, I think it was one of my friends pointed out, well, if you really want to get technical, if you look at all of the, out of all of the 180 designs, less than half of them have got not in this lifetime written on them. So it's not something that's, a default addition to the poster. So to not have it on the poster is the default, it's not something that is an automatic go-to for when it comes to laying out the design for the poster.
Right. And personally, I think this one is a great reference to the region because it's basically to me, the way I interpret this design, it's a reference to archaeology and that this mosaic got covered up at some point in history and it's been exposed now, right? And that happens a lot in that region of the world. And in fact, recently there was a story about this beautiful mosaic that had been buried under a foot of earth, and I'm just how the hell does this happen? But so to me, I think that's a great reference to the region. A huge fan of this one. But here's a weird thing about this one. Any fans out there, tell me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen one yet. There's no shirt for this one. At least I've never been able to find one, or images of one for that matter either. And by the way, before you send images, I'm not talking about bootleg bullshit. I'm talking like the real official shirt, right?
The lithograph shirt, right. The official lithograph shirt.
Right, yeah. And yeah, I should say, lithograph shirt. I'm sure there was ones that said Tel Aviv on them, but the lithograph shirt, right, exactly. So anyway, I love it.
Okay. Excellent. Well, that's it. We got through Europe 2017.
Man.
Now, all that's left to do, really, is the aforementioned awards.
Yes.
First and foremost, let's hand out our November Rain Awards for the best lithograph from the leg. Which lithograph are you giving your November Rain Award to, Tim?
I'm really leaning towards either Bilbao or Munich. And I gotta say, as much as I love Bilbao, and I do, I'm going to give the edge to Munich for me personally. Yep.
For me, undoubtedly, it has to be Madrid.
Oh.
It pushes all the right buttons for me, and it's almost as good as Kobe in my book. If Kobe hadn't been one of my two sort of hometown concerts, if it hadn't been Japan, easily Madrid would have won me over. But to me, Madrid should be as revered and as valuable as Kobe.
Oh, all right.
Next up is the Chinese Democracy Award for the most underrated lithograph from the leg. This is a tough one for me because I think that there's quite a few that are underrated. However, the most underrated, I might have to give it to Zurich.
Ooh.
I think the Dada reference blows by a lot of people. I certainly don't blame them. I think that, I don't think Dada is as famous as many other art movements but it's such an appropriate choice for Zurich that I think it deserves a lot more love than it currently gets. And so, yeah, that's my choice there. Gdańsk and Copenhagen were up there as well, but there's no way that I could give it to any design other than Zurich.
Wow. All right. And you're right. There is a lot of underappreciated designs from this tour. And we were kind of talking about that earlier, like when I was saying, why aren't these as rare as the Bilbao and, right? Or as demand, right? But still, in terms of underappreciation, I'm going to have to go with Tel Aviv. I think that one is just, again, and and by the way, we were talking about earlier, which ones might look good with foil. I might go Tel Aviv on that as well,
Oh, yeah, okay. That would look gorgeous with blue foil.
Yeah, blue foil, I'm thinking, right, So, yeah, that's going to be my answer for the Chinese Democracy Award for this leg.
Okay. Next up, we have the Swimming with Dolphins Award for the strangest lithograph. Yeah.
I wonder if we're going to have the same answer for this one.
I got a feeling that we will, but let me know. What's your choice?
And don't get me wrong. Now all of us fully understand the reference, because not only we've had time, but we also have your website there. But still, I'm going to have to answer the Imola skull one. Don't get me wrong. The reference makes sense. That's not what's strange about it, but it's just still bizarre. The creases, the design of the creases and the marks on the poster, all of that, I just think adds up to make it a very weird and strange. The strangest one of this leg, anyway, in my opinion.
Well, it's a shocker, but I actually chose a different design.
All right.
For me, the award has to go to Nijmegen. I think that the weird windmill gun thing, it's just, I don't know, it feels a bit weird since, the theme is so very, very Dutch. Yet, it's not weird because it's a bad choice for a theme. It's just weird because I think it kind of misses the mark. And, when it comes to invoking the feeling that I'm sure it intended to invoke, it's kind of like a close but no cigar design, like, if someone said to you, okay, let's create a design for the Netherlands, for Guns N' Roses, you're going to think windmill, you're going to think guns and maybe roses. I don't know how many people would combine windmill, guns, and roses in that way.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, that's kind of strange. Not kind of strange, very strange. And so even though it's certainly not ugly, it's just bizarre, Nijmegen gets Swimming with Dolphins Award for me.
What someone could have done maybe, although this might upset purists, but of course the name of the band is Guns N' Roses, obviously, and I understand that, but maybe do the Guns N' Roses logo, but with tulips instead of roses.
Even if you wanted to stick with the windmill, I don't know. I feel like there's a better way to implement it all, but whatever. Okay, last but not least, the Bad Obsession Award for your favorite lithograph that nobody else seems to like.
Yeah, for this leg of the tour, this was actually a pretty hard one because there's a lot out there. But I think my answer is going to have to be Stockholm. Because again, it's like you said, it's not one you hear people really asking about and trying to find or anything. But for me, I think it's just great. You know what I mean? But I mean, maybe not the best one or anything, but I think it's very underappreciated by a lot of people. So that's my choice for that one.
I can understand that. I can certainly understand that. I don't think that there's too many people that have that I've seen, actively searching for it. But I know that people do like it, so it makes sense. It certainly is not for everyone, but it is cool.
Yeah.
For me, however, I think it's got to be Bilbao.
Oh.
It really does look cool in real life, which I imagine not many people can verify since it's so damn scarce. I could probably count on one hand the number of people who have seen a Bilbao in person, in terms of people I know. I love the Basque region. I love the city of Bilbao. I think it's a great choice to showcase Basque mythology. And I don't know too many people that like it anywhere nearly as much as I do.
Wow.
I think that In fact, one of my good friends who's got a very extensive Guns N' Roses lithograph collection thinks it's god awful. That he really doesn't like the demon or the devil type of motif is not something that he likes. And then to have the weird skeletons having sex that just tips it over the edge. And again, it's not really a design that I hear too many people searching for. It might not even, that might very well be because it's not a design that too many people have seen. Nevertheless, it is one of those designs that I find myself liking and not knowing too many people that agree with me. So yeah, Bad Obsession Award goes to Bilbao.
Huh.
Okay, well, we've come to the end of yet another episode, at the end of another leg of the tour. We've still got, quite a ways to go, but I think that we've definitely started to hit our stride, even though I feel like that we may have peaked with these designs in 2017, early, the first half of 2017. I'm definitely looking forward to hitting the U.S. city designs again. There were definitely a few special, strange, bizarre designs coming up that I think are still very, very cool. As always, I'm going to be looking forward to chatting about them with you.
Definitely, man. Same here.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. I think that we will cut it short here. It'll be, is short the right word? I guess we'll have to see how long it ends up being once it hits the cutting room. But thank you very much for giving me your afternoon, Tim.
No problem.
And I'm not quite sure how long it's going to be until the next episode, but I'm hoping it's not too far away.
Right on, man.
All right, talk to you later, Tim, and goodbye, and thanks for listening.
Have a good one, everyone.